Hello. This is What If Lady Toki Sent Luffy Back in Time. Please like and subscribe to my channel and check out the author and the fanfiction linked in the description. The smell of death covered the air. Blood, gore, carnage. This was not how it was supposed to be. Everything was on fire, his crew was scattered, possibly dead. His armada was demolished with the combined force of the two Yonko of the sea. All your effort and yet you still find yourself here. You have been defeated, Mugiwara. Kaido, Emperor of the New World, strongest beast in the planet and basically the hand behind Wano Kingdom, stood before Straw Hat Luffy, smirking at his victory. Not yet Monkey D. Luffy, who was dubbed the fourth Emperor of the Sea, lay flat on his face unable to move from the devastating Kanabo blow delivered by Kaido. My Nakama will though in his effort to feel the presence of his friends, there was none. As if they were no. They can't do anything for your Mugiwara. Kaido began, realization encompassed Luffy at the weight of Kaido's words. They are all dead. The beast's words echoed through his mind. Monkey D. Luffy has never tasted true defeat before, this was it. This feels like shit. He spat out blood as he attempted to push himself up. No luck. Every inch of his body was ridden with pain, then there was also the horrible realization that his friends were no longer of this world. Outfilled his mind, his observation Haki confirming his worst fear. Was the beast lying? No, he confirmed it himself. Did he have a choice in the matter? Not even the slightest. Will he die fighting? Till death there was no other way. Flashes of his life engulfed him, Zoro, Nami, Usopp, Sanji, Chopper, Robin, Frankie, Brook, Jinbei, Yamato, all of his adventures led him to this, dying at the hands of Kaido. Some luck if only he could have an opportunity to do everything all over again. Kaido's Kanabo was mere inches from connecting with his skull, he was seconds from dying, and yet all he could think about is regret. His fist connected with the beast as a last-ditch effort, but the funny thing was, the mace did not connect with him. The cloud of smoke enveloped Luffy as his body suddenly transported to another location, several hundred yards away from his battle with Kaido. In his place, a rock was substituted, receiving what would have been a fatal blow to the skull of Luffy. The rock shattered into a million pieces as the beast was flabbergasted at the event before him. Mugiwara, this is no place to die for you. One of his fierce rival, ally and most importantly, a friend, stated. He did not look like the calm, calculating man who Luffy was used to teasing. Trafalgar D. Waterlaw was bloody, beaten and gasping for air. Someone wants to talk to you before he could speak, ask a question, or even think about what was happening. Once again, Luffy had been teleported away from the battlefield and into a secluded room. In his wake, the former warlord had to manage, even for just a second, to hold the dragon before following the Straw Hat Pirate. But that was it, for 2 seconds he managed, and then Trafalgar D. Law disappeared from the world. At an undisclosed location in Wano. His ears rang as the immediate transportation by Law was nauseating. He felt his body tense as he could tell that a powerful person was with him in the tiny room. Hello Monkey D. Luffy. Do not be alarmed, for I am an ally. A woman in her mid-40s sat before him, wearing a kimono embroidered with golden flowers. Her hair was long, streaked with white color signifying her age. She had a gentle smile on her face, almost calming. Who are you? The first words that Luffy managed to muster as the crazy sequence of events was still being processed through his mind. My name is Kazuki Toki and I possess the time fruit. She took a moment for the Straw Hat to situate himself. I'm sure you have many questions, but I only have so much time. Luffy, you are a very important figure in this world and we can't lose you today. In the event that you die, we lose the end war. She noticed the confused look on the man's face, but held her hand up to stop him. Again, time is in essence Luffy. I have sent my son and Odin Scabbard 20 years into the future and, now I sent myself forward where the flame burns at its lowest to assist you as my last will. Monkey D. Luffy, I, Kazuki Toki, will send you to the past where you deem your love for the open sea began. Suddenly the earth trembled and the roof of the little room was ripped right off by a giant dragon. Kaido floated in the air in his dragon form, circling the room in which the duo resided. Goodbye Luffy. Make good of your chance was the last word from Lady Toki as Luffy found himself engulfed in white smoke. He could not even ask any questions, he could not even comprehend what just happened. As dragon fire rained down on the room, only one person suffered the ultimate price at the hands of Kaido that day, and it was not Luffy. The young man traveled through a tunnel, rewinding his life. Throughout the literal drive through memory lane, Lady Toki's voice echoed where you deem your love for the open sea began. What the hell does that mean? He continued to go through his memories, then suddenly everything stopped. Where did his love for the open sea began? He had so many questions in his mind it felt as if it could explode. Where are his friends? Why did she help him? What is this flame she is referring to? When did he fall in love with the sea? Then a flash of light swallowed him when he fell in love with the sea. Megumi held a young boy in his hands, prepared to launch him into the open sea. The young man had recently eaten a devil fruit, rendering him incapable of swimming in the sea. "This is for embarrassing me, you little shit." Right before the young man was going to be launched at the sea, a strong gust of wind engulfed the young boy and in his place, a 19-year-old man took his place. This man wore a red vest with khaki brown shorts. His chest had a noticeable cross-shaped scar embedded in his skin. "I still don't understand what the fuck is going on, but who the hell do you think you are?" The 19-year-old man punched the poor mountain bandit into the horizon, launching him far, far away. "What have you done with Luffy?" A menacing glaze pierced the very fabric of the new arrival. And yet he was not fazed, not even one bit. For his immense training and experience throughout his young life prepared him for even the best of the best. This man was a figure who he looked up to all of his life, his signature red hair gleamed with the sunlight. The Sea King jumped on the ocean when the young man was going to be tossed. This was when the red-haired man was supposed to give up his arm in order to inspire the young man. "I haven't done anything to him." It was that moment that the man understood what Lady Toki was telling him. He was given a second chance to save the world. He was sent back in time in order to correct his mistakes. Though this time with the body and experience of his future self. "I am Luffy. Like hell I'd believe you." The red-haired man disappeared into a red streak, flashing before the time traveler. He brought his sword down on him, intending to sever his right arm from his body. Though his sword met an ever so familiar black armor-like skin, covering the young man's body. Hockey. The Luffy stretched his legs to create some distance with the future Yonko. "Interesting, I kept my rubber fruit." "Hi Shanks, I barely understand it myself. But I am Luffy, and I am from the future." Luffy was so calm and collected. It was so unlike him. A complete contrast to loud-mouthed little man from not too long ago. "Interesting." Shanks lowered his weapon and began to caress his chin, thinking. "Care to tell me where you came from exactly?" "Well, I'm from 12 years into the future and I was fighting Kaido. I was losing and a Lady Toki sent me into the past to correct my mistakes." Luffy began to retell his story, but Shanks could not pick up the rest as only the beginning of his story was good enough for him. Shanks knew of a Kaido, the beast. He knew of Lady Toki who he sailed with during his time at Captain Roger's ship. He also knew of her ability to traverse time with her devil fruit. Okay, I understand. So what's your plan then?" "I need to gather a strong crew. And then an armada. During my time, the one I gathered was not strong enough to defeat Big Mom and Kaido's entire force." Shank decided to entertain the notion suggested by the young man. Say he was a time traveler and he was from 12 years into the future where Kaido wins. Then he would have his work cut out for him. "Where will you go then?" "I need to go to Whole Cake Island. My strongest opponent will be my strongest ally." In his mind, he already mapped out his crew and allies and even a plan for his original crew. Now it's a matter of swaying them into his cause. If only it will be that easy. In time. "Still surreal to me, Luffy. 1 second you were a little squirt and now you are a full-on adult." At a distance, Hagumi the bear screamed in agony as the Sea King took one big bite off of the mountain bandit, then it was silence. "It's my second chance, Shanks. I have to save everyone." The look of determination was something Shanks could not deny, only Luffy would give off a look like that. Add to the fact that the young man had brought in his experience and knowledge from the future. Lady Toki must have seen no other way to survive. "Odin, Toki, if this is the only way I have to make sure this boy wins." Shanks looked onto the young man, lost in his own thoughts. There they stood, Shanks and a 19-year-old Luffy, at the edge of the island known as Dawn Island in the Goa Kingdom. One man envisioning his plan for the future, while the other skeptic yet determined. At first he was very calm, collected, and his body knew what to do. But now that he began to get acclimated within the timeline, his eyes began to well up. All of his friends were alive, but more importantly, Ace did not have a massive hole through his chest. His brother wasn't dead. "Are you okay, Luffy?" Shanks touched him on his shoulder, attempting to calm the young man. Luffy shook off the thoughts from his mind. He had things he needed to handle. He needed a ride to Whole Cake Island. "Yeah, don't worry about me. Anyway, Shanks, by chance is red force coated in sea stone?" Shanks still had his overwhelming aura despite being 12 years younger. He was still a physical specimen, though obviously now he would have both arms. His face did have the claw marks from Blackbeard. Unfortunately that still happened. How does he know all these information? Shanks never told him this. Was he granted some sort of all-seeing knowledge? It is partly coated. Sea stone is hard to come by, not to mention expensive. "Why, what do you have in mind?" the red-haired pirate asked. Earlier he was more hesitant to even listen to the young man, but now he was intrigued at where this will go. The time-traveling pirate. In his travels with the Roger pirates, he met Lady Toki and he learned of her time fruit, although at the time, she could not really control her ability really well. She probably gained a better grasp of her ability in the future, thus sending Luffy in the past. If what the young pirate says is true, then Luffy really is an important person for the end war. Whenever that would be. So instinctively, he was more inclined to help the young man, he just has a good feeling about it. I need to get to Todo Land, I have to get someone. You can just drop me off and I'll find a way out. The last time he entered Todo Land, he could barely make his way out. Though this time, he had a little bit more experience and he was better prepared for Big Mom, especially her sweet commander. Can he do it himself? More than likely no, but his goal is quite simple. Go in, retrieve his strongest ally, get out. Will he join his cause? Again, maybe not. Will he still try? Hell yeah. At Charlotte Linland's territory Luffy, do you know how dangerous this will be? Shanks knew of her monster strength as she was a notable member of the Rocks Pirates, a rival pirate crew that almost reached Laugh Tale before the Roger Pirates. Yeah I know, but I need to get this person, and well, a handful of others, in order to make sure that I win this time around. The man he sought after in Todo Land was a strong individual who pushed him to his limits. A very powerful enemy though more importantly, a very strong ally when the time comes. Fine, but we would need to pass through a couple of locations. We need to go through the Calm Belt first and foremost. Then I would need to restock in Sabaody, get coated, then we need to pass through Fishman Island. Then once we pass through the Red Line, we would then need to exit through the Calm Belt once more and enter the South Blue, before finally reaching Todo Land through the Calm Belt. Why should I help you? This seems more like a headache than a benefit to me. In that moment Luffy knew he would have to give the red-haired pirate a little bit of future knowledge in order to gain passage through his ship. Fine. That will work, hopefully some people joins me along the way. Luffy pointed at his left arm which remained intact. You would have lost your arm today as you wanted to inspire young me to become more than just a pirate, but a good man who is willing to sacrifice himself for others and. Also you've met him already, but you will surely clash with him once more, he is the future wielder of the dark fruit be wary, and do not underestimate him, he will before he could continue, Shanks held up both arms signaling for him to stop. He had an idea of who Luffy was referring to, the man who never sleeps. Alright enough you freaky bastard. I get it, but I would not want to know what the future has in store for me so, I will bring you to Todo Land, but you're on your own after that. Shanks considered helping him escape as well, but if he really is the promised child as he believed him to be, then he won't die in Big Mom's land. If he dies then he was not the man he believed him to be. Sounds like a plan, when do we sail? Luffy had his signature grin plastered across his face. This reminded Shanks of Gold D. Roger bringing a smile on his face as well. He dipped his head ever so slightly and grabbed the straw hat from his head. 2 weeks, I have some business here, and also I was going to give you this hat before we set sail, but I have a feeling you already knew that. Shanks placed the hat on Luffy's head, causing tears to flow from Luffy. Thank you. In 2 weeks it is. With that, Luffy took off, wiping the tears off of his face. Being a lot older, the significance of receiving the straw hat from Shanks made him tremble in excitement. I have 2 weeks to handle my business here then. In this time period, Luffy hasn't met Ace and Sabo yet so they will not know who he was. He had a plan on how they could meet, he just had to wait a little bit. He also wondered if his father and grandpa will show up sometime in the next 2 weeks. He knew that they are keeping a tab on him. They are bound to learn of his sudden growth. Day 1. The young man wore a blue overcoat along with a white scarf. He was missing a tooth and he smiled at the person beside him. He had a top hat with hexagon-shaped goggles and his weapon of choice was a metal pipe. Beside him was a young man the same age as him. He wore a yellow tank top and shorts. He had jet black hair along with freckles on his cheeks. These 2 young men were Sabo and Ace, in the process of stealing some money from rich aristocrats. Luffy observed them in the distance as his heart was going to skip from his chest. His brother, Ace, was alive and kicking ass. A single tear escaped his right eye as the realization that his brother was still alive finally set in. This time, in the week that he has before going to Todo Land, he will train the 2 young men as much as he could. They need to be ready for the future and he was going to give them a head start. An explosion rang in the air at the building in which the 2 young boys entered. Then a series of sirens echoed in the air as the boys began to run, jewelry flew from their hands. They were being chased by 4 adult males, just a couple of hired muscle, no big deal. Luffy kept his distance, they were cornered at an alley, no way to escape. The 4 muscular men smirked to themselves at catching the duo. You little rats, give everything back and we won't beat you up, said one of the thugs. Luffy had enhanced his hearing through observation haki and managed to hone in on the conversation from the distance. Ace and Sabo looked scared and yet they did not waver in their resolve. Eat ass. Ace tossed a handful of sand at the 4 men, managing to temporarily blind 3 of them. Sabo took this opportunity to slide under of the man who was not blinded and used his metal pipe to slam the living daylight out of his nether region. Gah! The thug yelled in a gut-wrenching pain. Even Luffy couldn't help but grasp his balls at the pain that the thug must be enduring. Ace and Sabo took this little window of opportunity to slip past the 4 thugs, though yet again they were stopped in their tracks. 16 other thugs surrounded the duo as the man they stole from was a very rich individual. Okay, time for me to step in then. Luffy disappeared from the spot he was standing on, leaving only a whirlwind of leaves. Within a blink of the eye, Luffy appeared before the 20 total thugs surrounding his brothers. Didn't your parents ever teach you not to pick on little kids? Punch first, ask questions later. Typical thugs as the biggest one of the men attempted to punch him in the face. He decided to take the punch to prove a point. He soaked his forehead in armament hockey just to take things a step further. The group of thugs laughed as the biggest of the group was able to land a clean hit. Though their smile quickly disappeared as the giant thug now had a limped right hand. His hand connected with the solid black armor hockey that covered the forehead of the straw hat pirate. Shishi, big idiot. Ace and Sabo took a step back as the sudden arrival of the stranger marked the end of the 20 thugs chasing after them. The duo was frozen in place at the display of fighting prowess of the straw hat man. Luffy decided to show off a little, not using any more hockey or his devil fruit ability. That wouldn't be fair. The giant thug fell over grasping his broken right hand, signaling for the rest of the thugs to gang up on him. The closest to him received a foot to the face, effectively knocking him out. Any more takers? The rest of the thugs took out knives, causing Luffy to chuckle. I guess no one is backing down. He already decided he was not going to use hockey or his devil fruit, so all he had was the good old-fashioned natural fighting ability that he possessed. 2 out of the 20 remaining thugs were out of the equation. We outnumber you, punk kid, 18-1. Exclaimed one of the thugs. Luffy smirked, causing a chill to run down everyone's back. I like those odds. Then it began, what would go down as the demasculinization of the thug population went down that day. For all 20 of the thugs were manhandled by a teenager. A teenager with a straw hat. Before any more trouble could arise, Luffy waved for the duo to follow him. In which they obliged, though with a questioning look on their face. Once they were deep in the mountain, Ace finally spoke up, pointing his wooden pole at the man who just defeated their captors. Are you some kind of pervert? Was his first question, causing Luffy to fall face first at such a ridiculous accusation. What the hell, you think I'm a pervert? Hell no. Exclaimed Luffy. Yeah? Getting all defensive, definitely a pervert. Said Sabo as he joined Ace in pointing his metal pipe at the man with the straw hat. Young Sabo and young Ace were both trying to look menacing, but they were so little it made him chuckle. Alright you little shits, I am not a pervert. He then continued to punch the head of both young men, causing them to develop a giant lump on their head. He began to laugh as Ace used to do the same thing to him back in his timeline. Then why did you help us? Ace exclaimed as he rubbed the area where Luffy caused a giant lump to form. Well you see, I am actually a very strong person and I took an interest in your fighting spirit. So I decided to train you to be stronger. Luffy half-assed his explanation. He really needed them to get stronger. So that they could survive the coming future. So that Ace won't die. Yeah right you damn pervert. Sabo exclaimed, causing Luffy to punch him on the head once more. Alright you twerps, if you don't want to learn from me then fine. I'll go and train some other people who want to get stronger. Luffy began to exclaim comically. We need to think about it first. For all we know you could be a serial killer. Replied Sabo. Yeah. A creepy perverted serial killer. Added Ace, who crossed his arms. Fair point. Said Luffy as he caressed his chin. Okay then, do what you want to and remember I am here to help. He gave them a warm smile. And with that the duo made their way back to their sleeping quarters. Away from the strange man with the straw hat. Well at least they're not as dumb as I remember. Good on them for not trusting a stranger. With that, Luffy jumped on a tree branch and decided to rest for the day. He was going to wait for the duo's answer. He closed his eyes and began to drift into sleep, though something particular caught his ear. Several miles away at a local pub, the sound of mindless chatter filled the room. He could tell it was a pub due to the content of the room and the white noises around it. There he found the familiar voices of several of the thugs he beat up earlier that day. In the tavern. Goddamn monster. I swear we had him. Embarrassing if you ask me, there were 20 of the strongest people in this island. That man is no human, he was a monster. This particular statement caused a smile to form in the face of the time traveler, though his smile disappeared as he sensed a man approaching the group. A monster you say? Where is he? The man carried a powerful presence about him. Despite the distance, Luffy could tell he was strong, very strong. The men began to tremble at the sight of the new arrival. Luffy could feel their fear. The name of the man, who is he? He went up the mountain the last time we saw him. said one of the thug, stuttering from fear. Luffy suddenly shot up as the powerful presence begun heading in his general direction. Then a troubling news reached his ears as those thugs finally revealed who the man was. That was Dracul Mihawk, the closest to being the world's strongest swordsman. What is he doing in the East Blue? Just our luck meeting a bunch of monsters. Fuck. Exclaimed Luffy in the air, for Dracul Mihawk was heading towards him. What should he do? This man was so strong that he would duel with Shanks to a standstill. This man was possibly the strongest warlord of all time. This was probably the business Shanks spoke of yesterday. Though he was 12 years younger, which means less experience. Wait a minute, maybe just maybe right. Though he would have his answer soon enough, as before him, Mihawk held his arm up, pointing Yoru, his infamous giant black blade, at Monkey D. Luffy. Are you the monster they speak of? Said the swordsman, though his hawk-like gaze was observing every inch of his body. I've been here one day, and I caused this much trouble. Geez. Luffy began to think of a way to get out of this mess. Too bad he can't think of anything. No. I am not the guy you are looking for. He went that way. Luffy pointed behind Mihawk, although this only caused a smirk to form from the man before him. Luffy had to suddenly bring his arm up to protect his face, his entire arm was covered in haki. Mihawk had charged him, closing the distance between the two. Yes, you are definitely the monster they speak of. With that, Mihawk jumped backwards, sizing up the straw hat man before him. That hat belongs to a rival of mine, why do you possess it? This. Luffy pointed at his hat, smirking at the future world's greatest swordsman. Shanks gave this to me. Is that so? Another smirk escaped the swordsman. Then you are a worthy opponent. Mihawk once again charged at Luffy, though this time, he jumped up. Gomu no jet stamp. With Mihawk being below him, Luffy used his stamp to flatten the swordsman on the ground, surprising him. Blood escaped the mouth of the swordsman as he quickly got up. Luffy did a backflip to create some distance between them. Mihawk wiped the blood from his mouth and continued to smile. Mihawk sliced his blade horizontally, aiming at the man before him. Energy formed from the tip of his blade, traveling towards him. Luffy decided that men like these will not listen to diplomacy, so he would have to use his fist to drill some lessons toward the swordsman. Alright, you asked for it. Luffy's body was covered in steam, turning a light shade of red. Then his movement began to escalate. In all his years of fighting, Mihawk has never seen this power before. Your name, warrior? Mihawk said as he began to swing his blade in Luffy's general direction. VSH. I am no warrior. Exclaimed Luffy, his childhood dream was still a motivating factor for him. Listen well, my name is Monkey D. Luffy, I will be the Pirate King. Yeah, and he would have died in the future if it wasn't for outside interference. How strong is his resolve if he died? Right, and I will be the world's greatest swordsman. Mihawk joined in what he thought was a jab at ridiculous claims. Alright, I will be the Pirate King then, because you can be. This caused Mihawk to stop slightly, giving Luffy just enough opening to throw in a left hook. This caught both fighters off guard as Luffy did not expect to connect, while Mihawk did not expect to be hit. I apologize, Mugiwara. It's just nobody has believed in me before. Well, I chose the isolation life and it was just strange to hear a compliment. The fierce fighter was taken aback by something he was unfamiliar with his whole life. Shut your face, Mihawk, you being sentimental is kinda creepy. Exclaimed Luffy, although he meant it more as a jest rather than to offend the man. This caused a smirk to form in the face of the swordsman. You are correct, therefore I must regain my dignity by ending your life today. Luffy shivered at the statement by the swordsman, although he had a slight smirk on his face. Mihawk was joking. Throughout the rest of the night, Luffy and Mihawk dueled, not one gaining an edge over the other. Luffy had yet to use anything other than Gear 2, and Mihawk was using the dull edge of Yoru. It was that evening that the two fighters gained mutual respect for one another. Day 2. The sun rose on the horizon, and two young men arrived at the scene. Sabo and Ace had their mouth open as they arrived at the battle's finale. They were going to tell the Straw Hat Man, no thanks, but that battle that they witnessed completely opened their eyes on the prospect of learning from the Straw Hat Man. How about we call it a day, Mihawk? It's dawn already and I got to train some squirts. Luffy was panting as he was pushed like never before in a spar. Note that this was just a spar, not life or death. If he counted those, then Kaido would be on the very top in all-time life or death battle. I suppose. Well, Mugiwara. This was a good battle, I will go on my business and battle Red Hair in this remote island. Farewell then. Mihawk placed Yoru on his back, while Luffy finally had time to breathe. The two men approached each other and shook hands. Mihawk, I am traveling to the New World in order to get a strong ally. Will you join me in my journey? Luffy had to throw a curveball, maybe the man will accept. Interesting proposition, though for now, I will have to decline. I don't do well with a team. Mihawk began walking away though stopped mid-stride. Although there may be a first for everything. With a wave of his hands Mihawk disappeared in the distance. Suokual. Teach us. Sabo and Ace had stars in their eyes as they were practically begging Luffy. Luffy decided to have some fun with it. "Bah, you kids took too long, I found another to train." "What? Nuo?" exclaimed Sabo. "Boss will train 10 times harder than your new apprentice," said Ace as he flexed his tiny arm. "Yeah. I will work 100 times more than Ace, boss," retorted Sabo, who tried to one-up Ace. "Oh yeah, well I will work 1,000 times more than you." Then a fist fight ensued between the two friends, causing Luffy to bawl out laughing. How he wished he could be a child again and join in on such childish squabbles. "I don't know, you said some hurtful things about me," Luffy let out some fake tears. No boss, we were just joking, see. You are not a serial killer," exclaimed Ace. "Yeah boss, here. A token of our intentions." Sabo had pulled a golden beetle from his back pocket, the hardest bug to catch in all of the island. "Alright fine, I will train you both, but there's a catch. I only have a week and if you slack off, you will die, got it?" "Yeah, boss," exclaimed the duo. "Alright then, first training exercise. Pick up that rock." Luffy pointed at a rock 2 times the size of the young me. Ace and Sabo did as he said, and their little legs began to tremble. "Easy, now what?" said Ace in a shaky voice. "Oh, that's not it, run around this entire island until the sun sets." "What the hell? That's not possible," complained Sabo, although Ace was already on his way. "Ace, wait for me," exclaimed the young lord. "Shishi, now I can take a nap." With that, Luffy closed his eyes, napping for only a second, the boys going on their way to do as Luffy says. Though despite his claims to take a nap, Luffy had been thinking of many things since his return. Sure, he wants to go after strong people and recruit them, but he also wants to make life better for others. He contemplated going after the king of the Goa kingdom by cutting off the head of the snake. Will life be better for others? If he were to go after the king, who will fill the void? No sense of dwelling on that for now. While the kids were hauling the rocks all around the island, Luffy decided to visit his former mother figure. Mountain. Freaking children. Clean up after yourself, damn it. Curly Dadan was a big woman, taller than most, but her heart was in the right place. She had been looking after Ace and Sabo in the time that they have been lost. She gave them a home when no one else would, and dare she say, care about them like her own children. Suddenly, Dadan felt a strong presence outside of her home. She quickly picked up her axe and slowly made her way to the door. "Hello, is Dadan home?" the voice called out from the other side. Though she was still cautious at this new arrival. "What's it to you?" asked Dadan, mere inches from the door, axe ready to strike. "Just wanted to talk." "Alright, so talk." She did not open the door yet. "Can I see the person I'm talking to?" the voice called out from the other side. Dadan felt that the person could come in at any time, so decided to open the door. Who she saw was a young man, around his 20. He wore a familiar straw hat, one that belonged to the ruffian pirate named Shanks. "So then, talk." Dadan flashed her axe threateningly. "I wanted to meet the infamous mountain bandit, since you know, Haguma the bear was messing with me earlier." "Old coworker, haven't worked with him since he was, well, a bad person." "Who are you anyway?" "Monkey D. Luffy is the name, pleasure to finally meet the person who raised both Ace and Sabo. They kinda became my apprentices." Luffy laughed at the irony, and Dadan became less tense at the stranger. "Well, come on in then. You Garp's child or something?" Of course Dadan knew the old fart. "Grandson." To this Dadan smiled. "Then you're pretty much family, boy." She gave an embrace to the young man. Luffy did not know how much he missed a loving embrace, especially from his mother figure. He let out a single tear before wiping it quickly when she separated from him. "Well then, I just wanted to drop in and introduce myself, since the boys will be under my tutelage for some time. Just so you're not worried where they are." "PSH, I could care less," Dadan proclaimed, but Luffy knew otherwise. "Hey, quick question, in all of Goa Kingdom, who would you trust in running this country?" Dadan had a morale compass of someone with a pure heart, no other person to ask than her. "Good question, kid, if it were up to me, first got to get rid of that evil bastard of a father of Sabo running this place, and well, I simply don't have the answer on who can replace him. But if you ask enough people and enough of them say one name, then that's probably the person that will best represent the country. Don't you think?" Dadan said, which gave him an idea. "That's it, thank you, Dadan. Voting for the person to rule the Goa Kingdom should be the way to go. Take care of yourself, Luffy. You too." Ox Red Force. Shanks had been mapping out their possible escape routes in case the CP0 try anything. Shanks and his crew had forcefully taken the gum fruit from a transport vessel before it could reach its destination. Just as he was in deep thoughts, he wondered if having Luffy here at this time would stop the prophecy from happening, if being behind in time would cause everything to change for the worse. He needed to come up with a failsafe. He couldn't let anything happen to Luffy, the supposed savior of the world. Crazy to think that he was just a squirt before the time travel shenanigans. Red hair. Dracula Mihawk has found Shanks. Care to spar? Seems like you had a spar already. Shanks noticed a bit of scuff mark all over the swordsman. Yes, I met an interesting young man who carried your precious hat. He is interesting. So then, ready to let off some steam? Shanks pulled out his blade, Griffin. Always. With Mihawk retrieving Yoru, the duo exchanged swords, smiling as they seemingly danced. An interesting thing happened while conversing with the boy, Mihawk stated simply mid-swing. Oh yeah? Let me guess, he asked you to join him, didn't he? Shanks had an idea what Luffy wanted to do. Yes, what do you think of this? I've never worked well with others. I'd be offended since you never joined me when I invited you. Shanks joked, to which Mihawk returned with a powerful slice. But in all seriousness, he is a good kid with big plans. It's really up to you. It was then that Mihawk got a score by merely being inches from Shanks' neck. 1-0. You cheated. Goa Kingdom Royal Palace. The king of Goa laid peacefully on his bed, a group of women surrounding him. They were there out of force, not because they wanted to be there. He sat up, feeling a chilling feeling course through his back. Around him, the women began to scatter, running out of the room. There was a monster on his window, it wore a demon face and covered in all black attire. It tilted its head, releasing a menacing aura about him. Guards, guards! Yelled the king, and sure enough, a couple of well-armored guards rushed the demon. Though none of the 15 guards could get close to the man, falling flat on their face before reaching it. At this point, the king of Goa trembled in fear. All of his life, he lived comfortably in his lavish kingdom, tossing the troubles of commoners to the side to feed his insatiable thirst for power. What do you want? The king asked, to which the demon jumped from the window, walking past the unconscious guards until he stood over the mortified king. Step down from being a king, have the people decide who will lead them. His voice was deep and deadly, to which the king nodded furiously. If you try anything, I'll kill you. And just as the demon spirit was there, it was gone. The king of Goa will not defy the spirit, choosing instead to step down from his power, sending out a formal retirement to the world government and holding an open election to represent the kingdom of Goa. The new king of Goa will hopefully be more progressive in helping the poor, the unlucky, and grow the country of Goa to more than just a backwater island of the East Blue. The news of the king retiring from the Goa kingdom spread like wildfire, and in Luffy's walk back to his spot, he found the mayor of town, reading over the newspaper. You should run for king, whoop slap. A passing young man commented towards the mayor of Fuchsia village. This caused Whoop Slap to think about the implication. You know what, Luffy, I think I will, about time someone smart and sensible leads this country. Whoop Slap mused, not even noticing the sudden growth of the strawwet man. Luffy headed back to his hammock, laying back down to take a quick nap before the two kids arrive. It had been a long day indeed. Day 3. Makino's bar. Shanks, what is Buggy up to these days? Luffy visited Shanks at the local tavern, the look of shock covering Makino's face at Luffy's sudden growth. Growth spurt sis. Luffy commented toward Makino, who went to the back to wash water over her face. She must be seeing things, or losing it. He's at some island out east. Wallowing in self-pity. At least I think so. Shanks stated simply. Keeping tabs on your old buddy. He is my first friend after all, Shanks responded. Then they just dropped it. Luffy bid farewell to the red-haired pirates as he had somewhere he needed to be. Mountain top. Luffy then headed to his spot where the two kids were waiting patiently for their teacher. On the third day of training the two kids, Luffy trained their mind and body. He instructed them to sit under a waterfall and hold out their hands while carrying 2 heavy pots. For the next 2 days, I want you to train your bodies enough that you can take a punch from me, don't slack off. Yes boss. Yelled Ace and Sabo. While they were busy doing that, he decided to pay a local fisherman to bring him over to a nearby island. He had a certain clown he's been meaning to visit. If the info he got from Shanks was correct, the pirate clown was hiding out at a small eastern island's tavern, drinking his life and potential away. Somewhere east. So Luffy set sail along a fisherman's ship, arriving at a small, remote island home to only 100 people. He made his way to the local bar, only to find the bartender and a lone man, sitting by himself in the bar. Out of all the bar stool, he chose to sit right next to him, but the man didn't even acknowledge him, continuing to mind his own. Are you Buggy the clown? Luffy asked, ordering his signature milk from the bartender. The man gave him an odd look, but it did get a reaction from him. What's it to you? The clown spoke up, turning to look at Luffy. He must have been drinking his life away at this bar. Funny enough, this was not the Buggy he knows, for he wore no makeup and he did not wear his signature red nose. He was just a broken man, with no purpose. Where was Kabaji and Moji? Probably not with him yet. Maybe this was before he was the joyous idiot that he met in his early days. Why was he so miserable? I heard you are a pretty reliable guy. Luffy pointed at his straw hat, causing Buggy to wince a little. "Shanks?" He said that, huh? Buggy then turned away once more. "I'm not your guy, kid, all I'm good for is getting others killed." "I don't see it that way." To this, Buggy slammed his glass on the table, shattering it in his hands. Blood began to flow from his hands while the bartender hid in the back room. "You don't know jack shit, kid. The treasure of Captain Jack, it's all I ever wanted for a long time. My notoriety alone gathered me a crew of idiots who saw me as a god. I got a big head and thought I was invincible. And so I went after Captain John's treasure, only for my entire crew to be wiped out. All of them dead, all but me." Buggy expected Luffy to see him as a monster. But he didn't, he was indifferent. "Your former crew would be very disappointed in you." Luffy removed a cloth from his pocket and gave it to Buggy to stop the bleeding. "They knew what they were getting into, knowingly risked their life to sail with you. But why am I the only one who survived? Ever stop and wonder how lucky you are? It could be fate, destiny or whatnot. Instead of asking, why not survive?" It took a moment for Buggy to take in, but eventually Luffy could see him come to a conclusion. "I never saw it that way, I guess." Buggy wrapped his hands in the cloth after pulling the shards of glass from it. "I got to go." Buggy then got up and left, he needed time to process things. Luffy gave him his space, he had a feeling that Buggy will need some time to process things. Day 4. He found a nice place to rest for the night, under a massive tree that gave enough shelter. The ground was cold and lumpy, but who can complain, at least he didn't have to worry about dying just yet. Luffy hadn't had a good night's rest yet, and this would be the closest to one. The reason why he woke up in a jolt was due to a commotion at the same local tavern he found Buggy in, though he was surrounded by some ruffians. Luffy immediately dashed to that direction, even going as far as activating Gear Second to rush at the scene. What he found was a bloodied and battered Buggy, laying flat on his back. Above him, a familiar man, one that Luffy did not expect to show up just yet. "This your friend Clown? Another person in Roger's crew, is it? Bunch of losers you all are, I tell you." Around him, a group of 15 thugs laughed at their captain's joke. Even in his early days, it seems that the strongest of the East Blue surrounded himself with a bunch of people. He's no friend. Buggy tried to cover for the stranger in the straw hat, he didn't want to involve him in his problems, but Luffy insisted. "Yeah, and you just made a mistake." Luffy began to step up, but this caused a laughter to erupt from the man. "Don't you know who I am?" He revealed his 2 golden pistols, pointing them at Luffy. "I'm Don Krieg." Then, the future Armada captain unleashed 2 bullets straight to the heart and brain of Luffy. Unfortunately for Krieg, Luffy was a rubber man. The bullets merely bounce off of him, hitting 2 of his men. Krieg became wide-eyed, immediately hiding behind his men. Using them as a meat shield while he made his escape. "I don't give a fuck who you are, you've hurt my friend." Buggy was shocked, didn't really think anything of the boy as they only had one conversation. Buggy was about to protest, wanting to protect the young man's life before making a mistake on him, but as he was slow to get up, what he found was not what he expected. Luffy stood tall, his hand grabbing Krieg by the neck. Around them, the 15 thugs he brought with him were all passed out. Buggy was wide-eyed at what transpired, it seems that the boy was full of surprises. The only person that ever gave him this feeling of hope was his former captain and reluctantly that red-haired buffoon. "Oh hey Buggy." Luffy simply tossed Krieg to the side like he was nothing. "Cool, you wore your makeup." Sure enough, Buggy, despite being bloodied up, was wearing his clown makeup, complete with his red nose. "Yeah. I guess I am." He chuckled. "Some stupid kid reminded me that in the pirate world, our lives are always at risk." Luffy helped Buggy to his feet, assisting him over his shoulder so that he could get his wounds checked out. "How'd you get in a fight anyway?" Krieg bad-mouthed Captain Roger, and I just snapped. "You dumbass, losing against some stupid thugs." Luffy chuckled, and so did Buggy. "Yeah, I guess I lost a step in my prime. Never too late, you know. If you want it enough, I'm sure you can do it." All this positivity reminds me of freaking Shanks. Bleh. The rest of the trip to the local hospital was just random conversation. Luffy dropped him off and bid his farewell, hopefully inspiring him to jumpstart his pirate career. On his way out of the front door, Buggy chased after him. "Mugiwara." Luffy turned to face the clown. "Thanks. No problem. See you in the new world." And with that, Luffy left Buggy on his own accord. To rediscover himself, inspire him to reach his true potential. Luffy paid off another fisherman to drop him off at Goa Kingdom. It was easy from there as he returned back to his spot under the tree. Just as he was about to close his eyes, the 2 trainees woke him up, showering him with stories of their past 2 days of training. Day 5. It was on this day his grandfather paid him a visit. "So you mean to tell me that you are from the future and you came back in the past so that you could save the world?" "Yeah." Luffy replied, knowing full well that his story was ridiculous to others. Okay, that explains your massive growth spurt. So tell me, how strong are you squirts? Monkey D. Garp was the hero of the Marines. One of the most powerful figures in the entire faction. Despite his allegiance, he had a massive heart and he especially loved his grandson, which happened to be Luffy. Hell yeah, I'm strong. Though he could not continue his sentence as Garp charged the pirate with a massive fist of love. Bullshit. You must be some kind of fruit user. Where did you put my grandson, you little bastard? There it was, the expected response to the news that he was from the future. Alright grandpa, I get it. But let me tell you something, I know who Ace's dad is. Garp had been pummeling him through this point but suddenly he stopped mid-punch. It's some random pirate who died in the past. What about it? I know that's not true Gramps. Luffy then regained his composure and created some distance between them. His father is Goal. Shut your mouth, people might hear you. Don't you know this? Garp covered the distance between them in a matter of seconds, covering the mouth of Luffy. I guess it's true then. How? Lady Toki of Wano Kingdom sent me back in time at the cost of her life. Replied Luffy. He would only tell a few people about his time-traveling mission. Luckily his grandpa was one of the people he was going to release the information to. I see. Wano Kingdom is not a place we Marines can go to freely. I have so many questions for you. Garp began though Luffy stopped him. Sorry Gramps, but I can't tell you any more than that. All you can do is trust me on this one. I'm your grandson after all. Alright, fine. Well, I actually came by to check up on you, but seeing how you have grown massively stronger. Thanks Gramps, the only thing I ask from you is please look after Ace. Just please look after him. The mood suddenly became grim in which Garp cleared his throat. Yes, well seeing as I don't have to worry about you as much, then I can do that. Anyway you became a Marine in your future at least. Shishi, you will soon see enough Gramps. Garp threw his hand in the air. This damn trip has been a headache I tell you boy. Checking up on the new king of Goa is a surprise to say the least. Oh you mean newly elected King Whoopslap? Luffy had heard the news of Whoopslap victory, it was a landslide, unanimous as he was who the people wanted. Yeah. Damn former king retired and elected to create a democracy off of a monarchy. That is something else. Garp scratched his head and picked his nose. Well if it helps the people, why not right? Wise words young man. Well then I guess I'm off to say hi to the new king, Whoopslap of the Goa Kingdom. Maybe grab a mojito on my 2-day break. Garp left Luffy to himself, waving goodbye to his grandson. Makino's bar. Garp did in fact find himself at a bar, grabbing a few drinks to pass his day. Though it was there he found red-haired Shanks and another interesting guy by the name of Mihawk. You're lucky I'm on my day off brat. Garp sat beside Shanks, with Mihawk giving him a sideway look. Oh of course, like you can catch me old man. Shanks teased. Thanks by the way. Don't mention it. Garp did not want to expand on what Shanks was thankful for, but if he had to guess, it must have been the information of a certain devil fruit's location that he happened to slip by to the red-haired pirates. By the way Hawkeye, have you responded to the invitation to the warlord system yet? He changed the subject, you never know who could be listening. Haven't really looked at it, I am here to duel with red-haired and that's what I shall do. Mihawk replied, he did not care for the formalities, who he was speaking with. He had the strength to back it up. I see, count your lucky stars pirates, I'm on vacation for the next 2 days. Garp looked around the bar, with Ben smirking at the Marine and Lucky Roo putting up his hands as a mock surrender. He chuckled to himself as he got up to leave, and so did Shanks. We sure are. To that Shanks raised his glass before taking a drink out of it. Mihawk paid no mind, drinking a bit more to contemplate his plans for the future. Well if you excuse me gentlemen, I have a bartender to meet with. Shanks' eyes followed Makino as she made her way to the back stock. He then exited out of the front door of the bar and met her at the back exit of the bar. Shanks. Instead of being surprised, she immediately leapt into his arms and embraced him. I have 30 mins to grab something to eat. Are you ready? Always Makino. He responded with a smile. No one has ever made him feel this way, and to find this sort of feeling in the East Blue, well he can thank his lucky stars that Zephyr Full was after him or he wouldn't be staying in the islands for so long. So get this, with Whoopslap excuse me, King Whoopslap taking reins of the Goa Kingdom, they want me as mayor. Crazy. The rest of the way, the two were engaged in happy conversation. Though Shanks had a feeling deep in his guts that he couldn't stay for much longer to enjoy these moments or can he? Day 6. On the 6th day he let them spar until they could not move anymore. It was on this day that his father paid him a visit. A fluctuation of the weather covered Dawn Island. It was weather that would make Nami glow in excitement. He smiled to himself as he sent the two boys to do something as he conversed with the coming storm. Father. Monkey D. Luffy greeted the man who he never truly met in his days. But he knew this man, the same man who saved his hide as he almost saw defeat at the hands of Smoker all the way back in Lobetown. Luffy, you have grown. The disbelief in his voice was evident. For just a couple of days ago Luffy had been merely a child and now he had grown exponentially. Yup, hit a bit of a growth spurt. Luffy wondered how he should react. Should he hate his father for being absent all his life, but then he never really looked for his father. Don't worry pops, I'm the real deal. Luffy picked up 2 rocks from the floor, tossing them at 2 different trees around him. One was caught by a tall man who wore a crow beak over his face. The other, a smaller animal, one equipped with different gadgets all over him. Friends of yours? Oh yes. Luffy, these are my comrades, Lindbergh and Karasu. The duo nodded their heads at Luffy to which he returned the gesture. Well it seems that you are well on your own path Luffy, whatever it is, I will always be watching. Sure, do what you want. Luffy then started walking away. But he remembered something he needed to ask his own father. He did it before in his original timeline, he wondered if he would do it again. Dragon, are you stopping here for some time? About a week, why son? I have a favor to ask Luffy then asked his father only to get a unified agreement from the group. Thanks. And with that, he left them. Such a strong presence. Karasu was drawn to his strength. Yes, I wonder if he is a cyborg. Lindbergh pulled up an object shaped like a gun, Dragon immediately stopped on the contraption. What? Can't a cat make sure if your son is a cyborg? I can assure you Lindbergh, he is human. With that the trio left. Luffy was disappointed that Lindbergh didn't escalate the situation by firing his gun. Oh well. So Luffy found the trainees and on the 6th day, he told them to meditate. And boy were they going to be in for a surprise soon. Day 7. So what's the news old man? Luffy sat on the window of the very same castle that he invaded mere days ago. In fact it was the same spot where he forced the king to step down from his office. Ought to go to a big political meeting and whatnot, something called a reverie. Didn't want to do it, a lot of work to do here in the Go Kingdom, but I have to if I want the world government to recognize my reign and leave me the hell alone. The old man never changed, King Whoopslap gracefully accepted his position and immediately went to work. Heavier taxation on the rich, more incentive for work and programs for the lower class citizens. First order of his project was cleaning out the Great Terminal, relocating the people that live there, and rebuilding community centers and housing where the Great Terminal used to be. Second order of business was renaming the kingdom into something else to rejuvenate the passion of the citizens and putting the darkness of the last family in the past. Right now Windmill Kingdom and Dawn Kingdom were leading the polls. Everyone was passionate about the possible changes and King Whoopslap was popular amongst the masses. If his time travel could affect people even in the smallest way, he was going to help his home country prosper rather than fall in the hands of Starry. I don't know who to trust yet to watch over me, say kid you wouldn't happen to be busy this next week would you? King Whoopslap was a cautious man and a good judge of character. He knew Luffy was a good man despite his sudden unexplained growth spurt. How long have we been talking? Accounting for travel time, about 2 weeks. Luffy was going to have to talk with Shanks, but he can't pass up this chance. Sure I'll be your bodyguard old man. Easy and simple, Luffy couldn't believe he was going to see what happened in the Reverie in the past. He hand in making it happen of course, but it is still an instance to think about. Great kid, we leave at dawn tomorrow. Dawn. I really like the name Dawn Kingdom. But Windmill Kingdom is also a good name. Whoopslap whispered under his breath on his way to meet up with local builders to discuss projects for Great Terminal. Despite Luffy hanging out in the king's chamber and running around the castle like he owned the place, Whoopslap never stopped him. Formalities and grandeur was never what Whoopslap wanted in his ascension, he wanted change and prosperity for his citizens. Makino's bar. Luffy knew exactly where to find Shanks, hanging out with Makino. Hey Shanks. Luffy began as he was waiting behind the bar once more for Makino to get on her lunch break. Oh Luffy, just the person I was looking for. Shanks stood up. Listen, I know you have to leave by next week, but can we hold it just a bit more? Another week maybe? Sure. I know you want to get this destiny thing handled and wait, did you just say okay? Shanks didn't hear him at first, but then it finally processed. Yeah, no problem, I'm hitching a ride with you anyway. Okay, then, see you then. Sure thing Shanks. And Luffy headed up the mountain, where he would find his students. Mountain top. On the 7th day, Luffy pushed the 2 young men to their limit by sparing them. They were unable to lay a finger on him no matter what they tried. Listen here you 2 eggheads. Tomorrow will be a new day. So you best behave no matter what happens. I'm going on a little trip so. Then how are we going to get stronger, boss? Trust me, you have nothing to worry about. And if there was no one to train you, I thought you all enough that you can train yourself right. Yes boss. Good. Day 8. So at dawn, Luffy met with the entourage of guards and marines that would be escorting newly appointed King Whoopslap to the Reverie. Among the Marines was his grandfather, looks like his 2 days vacation was just to wait for the escort to the Holy Land. "What are you doing here, kid?" Garp pulled Luffy to the side, whispering to him. "I need to know what I'm fighting, right, so going to the head of the snake would be the best." Luffy responded. He needed to know what he was facing. In his time in his original timeline, he only reached the pinnacle of the Marines, never the world government in its entirety. "Hey Gramps, care to show me what your prime looks like?" "Stupid kid, my prime is all the time." Garp slammed his fist on the palm of his hands and smiled menacingly towards Luffy. While before in his younger days he would be scared, this time he welcomed the challenge. Back in Fuchsia village, where a new mayor had been elected, Ace and Sabo cheered for a moment before sneaking out to go to their training. "Can you believe that Sis Makino became mayor?" Sabo said as he walked side by side with Ace. "I couldn't think of anyone else better than her for the job." "So big bro Luffy is gone on his trip, what do you think he has in mind for us?" Sabo and Ace finally arrived at their meeting place, where they found 3 intimidating figures waiting for them. "Ah, so you are the little squirt Straw Hat wants us to watch over." The small, bipedal cybernetic cat had a massive smile over his face as he played with his gun. "I didn't think our scouting mission was going to turn out to be entertaining." Karasu looked down on the boys, thinking of how strong they'll be after training with the strongest of the newly founded revolutionaries. "Hello Ace and Sabo, we are asked by Luffy to help in your training." Dragon took a knee to be at eye level with them. The 2 brothers looked at one another and nodded their heads in unison. Suddenly, they built up what little momentum they had and combined for a missile drop kick onto Dragon's face. "Brother Luffy said don't trust strangers." Ace yelled. Karasu and Lindbergh couldn't help but laugh. With the former hiding it and the other hysterically rolling on the floor. This was going to be harder than it looked. Day 9, Day 10, Day 11, Day 12. It took 3 days to travel from the Goa Kingdom pending a name change to the Holy Land, Marijo. For lack of a better word, it was magnificent, grand in that everything was covered in gold and all sorts of rare metal. The streets were lined with pearly white marble, along with a line of people dressed in all white. Luffy could only assume that they were slaves, but he can't make a scene, or there could be some dire consequences from his travel back in time. King Whoopslap had Luffy walk by him, his most trusted personnel from all the people that were guarding him. Again he was a good judge of character, and there was something about the young man that drew people into him. Unfortunately, Luffy had to leave his straw hat on board the escort ship, he could not be seen in the Holy Land with the hat, it was Garp's orders. And no matter how much he protested, Garp would not budge, even using armament hockey to shut him up. Speaking of Garp, he drilled some marine training onto Luffy, as if to convince him to join the Marines. The 6 powers was a start, but Luffy was yet to master any of it. Luffy would come out battered and bruised by the end of the last 3 days, and yet he would always come back for more. Garp found his tenacity to be inspiring, pushing his own men to be more proactive in their training, citing his own grandson as a model example. Back at the Reverie. King Whoopslap was receiving deadly glare from the masses, for the former that ruled the Goa Kingdom was easy to manipulate and influence on the votes, Whoopslap was not up for shenanigans. He was a respectable, no-nonsense king who looked out for his people. That was why King Cobra, of Alabasta, was the first to greet him. Luffy remembered the Sage King, he did leave an impression on him. His escorts were Pell, Igaram and Chaka, an impressive group to say the least. "Don't mind them." King Cobra greeted King Whoopslap, extending his hands to the new king. Luffy found the exchange as a positive, but his ears perked up when an annoying voice was yelling at a distance. Something about the event being super boring and he wanted to go home. He looked at the general direction of the complaining and found Wapple as a young man, throwing a hissy fit at his father. "Well then shall we?" King Cobra joined King Whoopslap in entering the meeting chamber, everyone was allowed one person with them throughout the meeting. The conversations were mindless, but Luffy took note of the familiar people he saw in the room. King Cobra was loudly advocating for the desegregation of the fishman population, while King Riku of Dressrosa was supporting his claim. The king of the Drum Kingdom spoke in favor of the request as well, but Prince Wapple voiced his disdain at his father's request. King Elizabella was indifferent to the entire case, which was a surprise for Luffy as that man was part of his armada. The rest couldn't be bothered, they cared more about financial support for their own pockets. Nothing got done during the first day of the Reverie, primarily a bunch of wealthy individuals trying to get wealthier. And so Luffy escorted King Whoopslap out of the meeting hall, where social hour occurred afterwards. "Noble efforts there, King Cobra." The king of Goa Kingdom approached his new ally. "But it seems that these people do not want changes to happen." "I agree." This time, it was King Riku of Dressrosa who approached the duo, beside him was a menacing-looking gladiator named Kairos. Luffy kept close as to eavesdrops on their conversation. At the same time, he had been building a mental map of the place, just in case it would be useful for later. He didn't know if he just got smarter, but he paid attention to the little details now, which would make Law so proud of him if he knew. Anyway, Luffy was able to count about 200 guards on just the social hall, then there were about 500 more surrounding a massive building, from the towers to the lower floor. But nobody was given access to it. He wondered what was there, but without getting closer, he wouldn't get a chance to take a peek. At least not yet. Day 13, Day 14, Day 15, Day 16, Day 17, Day 18. These past 6 days consist of primarily scouting missions, listening to mindless debates between the politicians, and nothing getting done in the end. He used his time wisely, memorizing the layout of what he had access to. Then he tested his luck on how close he could get within the important buildings before being forcefully turned away by the royal guards. He would feign a mistake before apologizing and going on his way. He wondered how strong the guards were, maybe he could take them. But then there were so many that it might just not be possible at this point. One more day of political strife. Luffy was able to learn so much yet not enough to justify the 1-week trip to the Holy Land. He made connections with different officers of different lands like Chaka, Pell, and Igaram of Alabasta. They were really cool people, proud of their historical heritage, along with the beauty of their oasis. King Elizabello dropped down his guards when he got to talking with Luffy, revealing the pressure and expectation of an entire country. He truly wanted to support the movement of banning segregation against the fisherman population, but then he would lose financial backing from the other kings. Would you rather be a bad person, mixed with bad people, or would you rather be a king who stands for what's right? This left an impression on the king, causing him to sway towards the side of Alabasta, Dressrosa, and Goa. Another surprise was the sudden support of King Raymond of Kano country. When the other kings began changing their stance, the king of Kano immediately switched sides. Luffy was surprised at this, seeing as this was the country where members of his armada, Sai and Old Man Chinjao, were from. So now Alabasta, Dressrosa, Goa, Prudence, and Kano were now voting together. 5 out of 50 kings was still not enough to push the issue forward though. Drum Kingdom wouldn't even step up with the same original fear as Elizabello. Now on the last day of socializing, the 5 kings were joined by their desire to find change in the world. While trading would be hard, they agreed to work together in spite of the other kings looking down on them. They were unable to make a change to the world this time, but in 4 years' time, they will come back with a stronger case. Luffy found inspiration in the political strife, despite thinking that it would be boring at first. This gave him the proper boost to enact his plan. He went into his room and dug into his bag. The red demon mask was in his hands, it was time to explore the Holy Land. He wasn't really the sneaky type, but he knew how to keep quiet. It was easy to move at the dead of night when the guards were relaxed. After all, the Holy Land had only ever been infiltrated one time, and that was by luck. Regardless, Luffy headed to the most heavily guarded place in the entire Holy Land. What was so special about that building, they kept it under heavy guards all the time. So Luffy snuck onto the roof of the building, sliding down to one of the high windows and opening it forcefully. It was locked, sure, but that never stopped him. He ensured that nobody heard him breaking in before sliding into the building. Curiously, he fell onto the marble floors, and before him, an empty throne surrounded by different kinds of weapons. That was it. That was the big fuss. An empty freaking throne. Couldn't have been all there was to it. But Luffy sensed approaching figures and immediately used Gear Second to get back to the upper window. It was too far to hear their conversation, and they seemed to be actively blocking out any attempt to be heard by others, maybe some sort of hockey. So he decided to just retire for the night. He did not want to get caught in the Holy Land and risk being sent to Impel Down. The fucking empty throne. Go figures. Day 19, Day 20, Day 21. Then the entire event finally came to an end and people started heading to their ships. The Goa Kingdom lost many allies due to their new stance, but gained the respect of Alabasta, Kano, Prudence, and Dressrosa. So there he was, lying in his own bunker, relaxing from the long formality-ridden week. It frustrated him to no end that he wasn't able to get more information on the world government on his visit, especially the stupid empty throne, but at least he knew what it looked like in case he had to travel here once more. It was time to go home, and it was time for more training with his grandfather. The journey back took another 3 days, mostly training and advising here and there for the new king. As soon as he got back, he made the slow walk to his sleeping place, just up above the mountain. And just as he was about to close his eyes, the sound of 2 frantic boys filled his ears. Ugh. Boss, wake up. Ace shook Luffy into consciousness. He was very groggy from the lack of rest as the sunlight pierced through his gaze. He took a moment to wake his body up, then he finally addressed the young man. What? Exclaimed Luffy, making a comical facial expression. We did it, look. Sabo was jumping up and down while Ace pointed at his pinky finger. They sure did it alright. Sabo's toe was covered in armament hockey, while Ace had his left pinky finger covered in the black coating. At least they managed to get a little bit of it despite being so young. And now his week was up and it was time to set sail with Shanks to the new world. And now it was the last day and the two boys managed to get a grasp of hockey, even just a little bit. Good. Guess Dragon and his goons were some help then. Finally, now I can leave knowing that you both have the basics at least. Now hone your skills, push each other and more importantly, do not die. He instinctively looked at Ace with this statement but quickly looked at Sabo as well. Well, we did kick their ass at first, but we let them train us. They left after a week though, so we had to teach ourselves the rest of the time. Nobody is killing me now that I have this new power, bro. Ace exclaimed. Yeah, I hope so. Wait, did you just call me bro? Luffy asked, in which Ace was perplexed. Sorry, I didn't, I meant boss. Ace began, but Luffy held out his hand to stop the young man. No, it's okay, bro is good with me, but I am your big bro, got it? Same to you, Sabo. It felt so good to go back to how it used to be, even for only a moment. Alright, big bro. Exclaimed Sabo. Though he had been sheepishly hiding something in his back the whole time. What is it? Hand it over. Luffy pointed at whatever Sabo had been hiding, in which the little boy revealed to be 3 cups and a sake bottle. Big bro, we heard of this tradition where if people share a drink together, then they are eternally bonded as brothers. We were thinking you will share a drink with us. Said Sabo sheepishly, in which Ace nodded his head enthusiastically. They were expecting Luffy to flat out laugh at them or get angry for even suggesting such a thing, but instead, well, the big scary pirate man with a straw hat was bawling out, crying. Of course I would share a drink with you too. Luffy proclaimed, and he took a moment to compose himself. The straw hat teenager could not believe that he would still partake in the brotherly bonding between the youngsters. Before sailing off into the new world with the Red Force pirates, Luffy raised a glass of sake, along with young Ace and young Sabo. The brotherhood. Proclaimed Ace. The eternal bond. Exclaimed Sabo. This was the happiest he has ever been, especially with the growing turmoil in his family. ASL. Luffy merely whispered as he was extremely emotional from the events that will transpire. ASL. What does that mean, big bro? Ace asked the pirate. Ace. Sabo. Luffy. Explained Luffy, to which the two children stupidly grinned. ASL. Exclaimed the duo, to which they all decided that this was the opportune time to drink their sake. Luffy downed his drink, used to the burning sensation coursing through his entire being. Meanwhile Sabo and Ace spat out their drink, not used to the strong spirit of sake. You boys train well, I will see you both in the new world, you hear? Luffy ruffled both of the youngsters' head before stretching his arm on a nearby tree, then catapulting himself to the sky. Bye big bro. See you later. Exclaimed Sabo, who had tears welling from his eyes. Ace did not say anything, though his eyes were filled with tears. Mayor House. Before heading to the port, on the front of the mayor house of Fuchsia village, Luffy was met with the new king of Goa, along with the new mayor of his hometown. King Whoopslap, Mayor Makino, what can I help you with? I just wanted to thank you, Luffy, for being my little brother. Take care of yourself, always. Mayor Makino embraced Luffy, not questioning how he grown so much. And for all the citizens of Dawn Kingdom, I also thank you, Luffy, for being, well, you never change, young man. Whoopslap placed a hand on his shoulder and gave him a nod. Despite ascending to kingship, Whoopslap never changed as a fundamentally good person. Luffy thanked the two people who were so present in his youth. He was glad he was able to make a positive change to the newly renamed Dawn Kingdom. Whoopslap will be an excellent ruler, along with Makino as a mayor of Fuchsia. Port of Dawn Island. Luffy landed on both feet as Shanks had his back turned on him. The Straw Hat pirate decided to surprise the red-haired man by smacking him on the back of his head. Shanks spat out his drink to the man in front of him, causing panic to both Luffy and Shanks. So we meet again, Mugiwara. The deadly glare could kill a common man, causing Luffy to tremble ever so slightly. For you see, Shanks was not talking to a random person, Shanks had been conversing with Dracula Mihawk. Hey Mihawk, been a while hasn't it? Well, we're going to be going now. It was nice seeing you again. Luffy began to drag Shanks towards the Red Force to avoid an unnecessary battle with Mihawk. Mugiwara. His voice was chilling, deadly, and authoritative. This caused Luffy to stop once more, and Shanks sped walk to the Red Force, leaving the two men to settle their animosity. I have a proposition. Go on. This perked Luffy's interest. This seems like it was headed to where he thinks it will be going. It has come to my attention, in my times of crossing swords with Reverie, that you are a fascinating individual. You proclaim to be the next pirate king, such a bold proclamation. Though I have to admit, you are quite strong for your age. Mihawk retrieved his black blade, Yoru, from his back and pointed it at Luffy. Monkey D. Luffy, if you are to become Pirate King, then I will aid you in your quest for my mission of becoming the world's greatest swordsman, aligned with your own aspirations. This caused many jaws to drop to the floor as Shanks and his crew were eavesdropping on their conversation. Even Luffy was too shocked to speak, causing Mihawk to clear his throat. Well. Fuck yeah is my answer. Alright Mihawk, you can join me on my quest, but you better not be dead weight, you hear me? Luffy replied cockily, causing a smirk to form in the mouth of the swordsman. Wouldn't even dream of it, Captain. Replied Mihawk, causing the red forced pirates to drop on the floor. Mihawk returned his sword on his back while joining Luffy in entering the famed red-haired pirate ship, the Red Force. For a serious guy, you sure are dramatic. Luffy states, causing a scoff from Mihawk. Dare he even say a laugh? I suppose, though Mugiwara, your desire will be the most dangerous of them all. For you see, I was there during the execution of Gold D. Roger. I was there when the golden age of piracy was kickstarted by his announcement of One Piece. Stronger pirate crews are closer to the One Piece than we are at the moment. What is your plan? His concerns were true, though his goal of becoming the Pirate King was now secondary to saving the world. Of course only Shanks knows about this, so that red-haired bastard better stay quiet. Wow, traveling through time has changed my personality ever so slightly. I feel more competent and daring. Real simple, I gather strong allies. You were a lucky addition to my merry crew, the rest of the people I want in my crew are around, and we will get them all before we challenge for the final treasure, the One Piece. Real simple, alright, in his mind at least. You know, I'll take it back, I'm still as brain dead as usual. Then our passage to the new world will be in vain if we have no escape from the land of Charlotte Linlin. That is where we are going eventually, correct? Though Luffy was actually thinking ahead, even if just slightly. He already sent out a message to one of his recruits, to be exact, he was going to send the message eventually. Boy Luffy, you seriously are an interesting guy, huh? Shanks was waiting for the duo to join them. First mate Ben Beckham was the one giving out the orders for their departure, while Shanks, Mihawk, and Luffy conversed with one another. Don't look at me, I didn't expect Mihawk to actually join me. In fact, I just threw a curveball. Luffy sat on a barrel located at the deck of the ship. Mihawk remained standing while Shanks took a hammock. Well, I thought he was really impressed with you and wanted to challenge you all the time in a way that he challenges me to duels, but for him to actually join you must be stronger than what you let off. Shanks exclaimed, red hockey escaped him, slightly revealing his powerful aura. I am right here, you know. I can hear both of you talking about me. To answer your question, red hair Mugiwara has shown the king's potential, the same feeling Gold D. Roger gave me on the day of his death. If Mugiwara is not as strong as I believe him to be, then he will die. If he is the man he is meant to be, then I will be his blade. Well, thanks for believing in me, Mihawk, and don't worry, I don't plan on dying anytime soon. Better be ready to fight till you're almost dead. Exclaimed Luffy, causing a chuckle from Shanks. So how's dear old Buggy? Shanks knew Luffy wanted to check up on the clown. Hopefully, better than the last time I saw him. With this Luffy gave him a smile. And the rest of your week? Shanks followed up, when he had to reschedule their departure, he didn't think Luffy would be for it. Boring. He still couldn't get over the fact that the big secret was an empty throne. Yours. To this Shanks gave out an obvious blush, though only for a moment. It was whatever you know. Luffy was going. Then silences covered the trio after the fit of laugh as they let themselves fall into their own deep thoughts. Shanks was thinking about Luffy's advice from the future. Be wary of a dark user. What could that mean? He knew no one of that sorts, or did he? Mihawk had been thinking about the world government. He had a letter from them to join the Shichibukai as an agent of the Marines. He was invited to basically become a government dog. Garp reminded me of the proposition, but he knew how to respond to the request. He had his answer because his loyalty was placed at the hands of a stranger he barely met 3 weeks ago. How times have changed. Luffy had pulled out a piece of paper and was scribbling a letter. The letter consists of his request, his way out of Whole Cake Island, which in turn would be a strong addition to his crew. Although he was not sure if the person who was receiving it would take him seriously. Maybe they would think it was a prank. Whatever, if push comes to shove, then he would just have to push his way through Big Mom and her many children, hopefully with the assistance of his initial choice for a first recruit. A second letter was written by Luffy, one of which was going somewhere in the North Blue. Hopefully the letter gets there on time. Mihawk had called for a messenger bird along with Luffy. Each one of them handed the bird a letter, one for different locations. Mihawk sent out a letter for his answer to the government's invitation, while Luffy sent out a letter to his hopefully future ally. Get some rest, guys, we have a long journey ahead of us. Our first stop after the calm belt is going to be Sabaody Archipelago. Shanks waved goodbye to the duo while going to his sleeping quarters. Luffy was trembling from his chair, an interesting idea went through his head. Hey Mihawk. Yes, Captain. Ready to raise some hell. We're at Sabaody Archipelago. Luffy had a plan on the island where world nobles frequently visit. Where people are treated as nothing but property. Where the slave auction house resides. "I see," was Mihawk's response. He did not really know the man completely, but he knew that he was not going to be bored in his adventures. Fishman Island, Fishman District. The Saw Shark Fishman was speaking with a young aspiring sun pirate recruit. "Humans are mere garbage creatures created to destroy all of which we hold dear. Believe me kid, in the future when you are part of the Sun Pirates, you will see what I mean," the Saw Shark Fishman proclaimed, crossing his arms as he looked over the distance of the ocean. "Yes boss Arlong sir. Of course, humans will always be scum, there is no way about it." Suddenly an explosion could be heard all over Fishman District. In the distance, a massive submersible with the indentation of a dragon hoof was as clear as day. These were the Tenryubito, coming for some more slaves for their entertainment. "They are not brave enough to threat our seas. These are those damned slavers. Hurry kid. Save yourself. I will hold them off." Although the Sawshark Fishman was ruthless in his hatred of humans, he will do anything for his own people. "Hatchin. Karubi. Hurry and clear the area." "Yes boss," exclaimed the duo, both of which were strong officers in the Sun Pirates. The Octopus Fishman and Ray Fishman followed the orders of their captain. "Homie and bastards. You want a fishman, you have to go through me." The Sawshark Fishman released his saw blade while facing down his impending doom. For before him, a giant submersible was closing in. "Boss." Hatchin screamed as he pointed behind him. There the kid stood, with a small coral blade ready to assist him. "Kid I said get back." He picked up the little fishman and threw him to where Karubi stood. Though his actions to assist the young warrior caused him to miss the harpoon that penetrated his upper arm. In the distance where his sister resides, a massive blood-curdling screech could be heard all over the district. For his sister could feel the pain he was experiencing. "Brother." She screamed as the giant mermaid collapsed on the ground. It was at that moment that a vision went through her head. King. Savior. Redemption. Blood. New era. A straw hat. What does this all mean? Why this vision now when her brother was in dire trouble? "Show me what will happen to my brother, you damned power." Then she saw it. She saw what would happen to her brother. And an air of relief encompassed her, knowing now what the future holds for him. "Fuck you." He brought his sword over his head and cut the harpoon that penetrated his arm. Though he got up to his feet, a series of electric nets were launched at his people. Like hell I let that happen. The lone fishman that day became a legend to his people, as with deadly injuries, he launched himself forward cutting as many nets as he could. A slice to the left, then to the right, and finally through the middle. His efforts were rewarded with the safety of his people. Though he now collapsed on one knee in the middle of a valley, facing the giant mechanical slaver submersible. He had no more energy to fight, and the slavers did not want to leave empty-handed. With one final net, the slavers aimed it at the fishman hero over the valley. He smirked as the net came his way. He raised his hands in front of him, showing it to his captor. Then he lifted his middle finger and flipped off his captors as the net encompassed his weakened body. Electricity coursed through his body, and yet he gritted his teeth. He did not give them the satisfaction of his scream from pain. Instead he passed out without a sound escaping from his mouth. As his eyes closed he was being pulled away from his home. And in the slavers' wake, as well as frustration, they launched hundreds of missiles, barraging the poor district of the fishman population. His last thoughts were, where are the royal family, the king who was supposed to protect his people? He was a hero to his people, though now on his own. Stories traveled quickly of the hero of Fishman District, the hero by the name of Arlong the Saw. The life of Dracula Mihawk was really simple. At first it was only a journey to become the strongest. Then it became a conquest, an endless travel to find a worthy challenger. His quest brought him to red-haired Shanks, a man with prominent swordsmanship. He frequently challenged a pirate to a draw, and the two would usually share a drink before Mihawk would head out to challenge another. His boredom grew as he became stronger, and only Shanks became a challenge for him. Marines took notice of his immense strength as they extended an invitation for him to join the Warlord program. An alliance of sorts giving him unlimited freedom in exchange for his services to the Marines. He tossed the paper to the side as he headed to Dawn Island, the last known location of Shanks. As fate would have it, he overheard a monster amongst the residents of Dawn Island. It was there he met Luffy, his new captain. It was strange to submit himself after another man's leadership, but this was the man who he would help raise to the ranks of the Pirate King. Presently, he trains on the deck of the ship known as Red Force. It was there where he performed his daily training regimen. He brought his massive black blade, Yoru, over his head, counting each swing. 998 999 1000. Sweat dropped furiously on his face as he completed one part of his training. He then switched his grip to his right hand and began again. 1 2 3. His life was simple, his goal was only to become the best. If he wasn't the best, then he failed. It only took an hour to complete his daily regimen. And this day was special, for it was the day that they arrived in Sabaody Archipelago. The calm belt was fun, as usual. He managed to bathe his blade in Sea King's blood. Though he only attacked those that attacked their ship. Mihawk demanded everyone to stand down as he performed the ship security by himself. Luffy gave him the approval to do so, while Shanks was happy to let him get loose. Mihawk fended off as many Sea Kings as he could, but to those that broke his perimeter, he had to end their existence. Hopefully the King of the Seas does not seek him for vengeance, not even he would want to challenge the power of King Neptune. The King of the Sea could rival the strongest of the surface world, and hopefully he did not awaken his wrath. As they near Sabaody archipelago, Mihawk took the opportunity to take a quick shower, resting his mind and body for his captain's plan. He knew full well what the ending was for what they were about to do. Luffy could not contain himself as the Red Force docked on the island. Remembering his last two experiences on the island wasn't the most pleasant of times. The first of which caused the separation of his crew, the second, a reunion. But with Sabaody came the human trafficking, slavery, and celestial douchebags running around the archipelago. I'm going to meet an old friend, behave yourself Luffy. And no matter what, do not engage the celestial dragons. Shanks disembarked from his ship joined by Lucky and Ben Beckham. They eventually disappeared in the crowd. It was then that Mihawk joined him. "Ready, Captain?" Mihawk asked. He wore his usual attire, although he did not bring his coat for this encounter. He was shirtless with white wrapping on his waist. He wore his usual black pants and shoes. His beard was perfectly trimmed with his cross necklace hanging from his neck. Finally, the most notable of his features was Yoru, the black blade along his back. Luffy finally stood up, his face was fuming with anger. He could feel their despair. People were crying as their spirits withered away for a lifetime of unwilling servitude. Slaves. Several different species have been pushed to the lowest in order to further the pride of celestial dragons. Slaves. They were forced to do as the slavers pleased, unimaginable things that dehumanized them. It was wrong, and Luffy knew that today will be the day that legal slave trading will end in Sabaody. Luffy led the way as he followed the area with the most restless aura in the entire island. He held his head high as his eyes flared in anger. Every step he could feel his emotions swelling. In front of them a celestial dragon rode another human laughing along as he made his slave eat the grass on the ground. "I want another one, this one is old and useless," mused a piece of shit. "I ought to just kill you here and now, but I'm kind, I'll let my new slaves kill you." "Please sir, I have a family," the man cried as he chewed on the grass off the ground, forced by the celestial dragon to consume. "Did I say you can talk trash?" A jolt of painful electricity coursed through the body of the poor man as the celestial dragon wanted to punish him. "Your name is now Trash and you do not speak ever, Trash." Despite the inhumane treatment, many people chose to ignore what was happening. What could they do? The celestial dragons have a firm grasp on the world. They are worshipped as godlike beings. So what could they really do? Nothing is the answer. But the man who could care less was there that day. Monkey D. Luffy walked towards the celestial dragon, each step causing a crater to form under his feet. His fist was curled in his rage. The celestial dragon took notice of the man approaching him. Hey. Stop where you are. Do you know who I am?" His guards blocked Luffy's path, but they were quickly forced out of the way as Mihawk took the defiance as a sign to cut them down. He took Yoru and slashed the guards across their chest, effectively eliminating them from Luffy's path. Their blood floated in the air as time seemingly slowed down for the celestial dragon. No words were said that day as Monkey D. Luffy took every ounce of his strength to bring his fist back, every pent-up emotions he built up throughout this time travel debacle, his anger to not being able to save his friends in his timeline, finally being released to the skull of the celestial dragon. His fist connected, sending the celestial flying throughout several hundred yards, crashing through buildings. If it wasn't for his protective suit, he would be dead. Mihawk cut the cuff that bound the slave, and before it exploded, Mihawk had swiftly tossed the exploding collar to the sky. "I'm free," exclaimed a former slave as tears flowed from his eyes. "My family, oh my family." He then began to run towards the port, unsure where to go, but as far away from the celestial dragon as the way to go. The celestial dragon finally stopped at the footstep of the auction house, where an auction was currently taking place. The announcer had just presented a powerful fishman for sale. Sold. For 1 million beery. Where the highest bidder happens to be the father of the celestial dragon that Luffy sent flying. As he was given his prize, he danced gleefully at obtaining a fishman for a slave, those were rarities in their market. "Listen here you filthy maggot, bend on your knees and be my footrest," exclaimed the slaver. The fishman did not comply, giving him a deadly glare. "Oh, you need to learn quickly." It was then that the slaver shocked the collar which held the fishman. This caused him to scream out in pain, finally collapsing to his knees. "That's a good boy." It was then that the slaver placed his feet on the back of the fishman and laughed to himself as he successfully submitted the fishman to his will, albeit it was despicable. Learn your place, scum. You fishmen are merely objects meant to be possessed by humans. People have this delusion that you can never be above what you truly are, but you can't, you are nothing but bottom dweller, mere footrest for us. Listen well as I though shock quickly filled the room as a commotion occurred in the entrance of the auction hall. The celestial dragon's son passed out in the entranceway, visibly twitching uncontrollably. His suite was filled with blood, royalty blood that means so much to them. What is the meaning of this? Exclaimed the elder celestial dragon. Though his throat suddenly found itself at the mercy of a giant black blade sitting diagonally across his body. Beside him a man with a straw hat sat comfortably, though he had been rubbing his hands together, seemingly containing himself from a violent outburst. The elder slowly took his foot off of the fishman, quietly putting his hands to the sky. The fishman stepped back a little, giving a scornful look at his slaver and an equally disdainful look at the bladed human and the straw hat wearing human. I'm going to tell you what happens now. He said in a low voice, then addressing the crowd who were too scared to move. You pieces of shit who participate in this need to clear out now. People began to flock out, leaving Luffy, Mihawk, the slaves on the stage for auction, and the fishman's slave beside the elder celestial dragon. Listen to me, and listen to me real carefully, this auction will no longer take place ever again, or next time we meet, your neck will not be attached to its body. You think you will be able to get away from this? The elder celestial dragon exclaimed as he did not even show an ounce of fear. What you fail to understand is that I do not care. Luffy said coldly. It was at this moment that he looked at the saw shark fishman, his eyes remained ablazed. Then within a millisecond, the cuff that covered his neck exploded in the sky. Luffy had used a technique he learned from Elder Hayu back in Yuden prison. This seemed like centuries ago, but in reality it was only a couple of weeks ago. How did you? The man asked. Doesn't matter, you will die soon enough. But he also found himself with his eyes behind the back of his head. The fishman had been freed, and he took this opportunity to chop the man's shoulder, effectively knocking him out. You, who are you? Mihawk took his blade and placed it over his shoulder. He was referring to the fishman who knocked out the celestial dragon. I am Arlong the Saw. Who the hell are you, humans? His voice was coated in venom as he openly hated them. Filthy creatures in his mind, only truly seeing their evil side and not their good side. I know exactly who you are. Though Luffy finally stood up, staring at the collapsed form of the celestial dragon. You're more than welcome to do anything at this point. Luffy took the time to hop on the stage and took the collar off of each and every single slave present in that auction. You can all go now, be safe. Trembling erupted outside the auction hall as the celestial dragon pressed their distress signal. Now an army of marines enclosed the auction house, along with the impending arrival of an admiral. Any minute now one of the powerhouses of the marines will rain on their parade. This was not something Luffy thought of carefully, as dying or getting caught here could result in a game over scenario. But he thought he had enough failsafe with Mihawk and Shanks on his side. Isco, the man who held the auction, had his hands up, he feared for his life at the arrival of Dracula Mihawk and the strange man with the straw hat. Despite the arrival of the marines, Luffy remained calm now with his sights set on Disco. You need to tell whoever is in charge that I will be coming for his head. He then joined Mihawk and Arlong at the entranceway, where a group of marines were surely waiting to ambush them. Are you stupid? You are openly challenging the Dunkwixit family? Disco exclaimed. Sure of himself that the strange man will tremble in fear at the name mentioned. I don't give a fuck who owns this place. I'm putting an end to it. Luffy answered, then punched Disco in the face, knocking him out. He then turned to the two people beside him. He considered them people, not human, not fishmen, people. Even though he had his qualm with Arlong, he could hopefully be redeemed in this timeline. Hopefully. Outside these doors are an army of marines. Possibly a marine admiral arriving soon. Our way out is Shanks' ship located at the northern port of Sabaody. He then kicked the door open without warning. I didn't agree to work with you, human. Although it was too late, as Luffy, Mihawk, and Arlong found themselves surrounded by hundreds of marines, cannons and guns pointed in their direction. Before the marines could mouth off their warning, Luffy activates Gear Second, dashing past the marines' blockade. Arlong looked at Mihawk, who smirked and brought his blade forward, disappearing in the same manner. Fire! Exclaimed the marine captain, although the marines did not know which direction to fire. Arlong had a split second to contemplate his choices, he opted into following them for now, just to escape. If they say his name with hatred common with humans, he will kill them himself. Despite being on land, Arlong was able to keep pace with Luffy and Mihawk, although Luffy was much faster than the duo. 1 second Mihawk and Arlong were running, and the next they were met with a massive explosion as the force of a powerful hockey-infused smash hitting the ground before them. Mihawk and Arlong stop in their path as a certain purple-haired marine admiral has two arms covered in the black resin-like armor known as armament hockey. Luffy felt it, this man was none other than Zephyr. Fuck, he did not think about him. Out of all the marine admirals that could come, he had to be the headache. That got him to thinking, who were the other admirals at this time? Was it Sengoku and Tsuru? He wondered. Luffy quickly stopped in his tracks and returned to aid Mihawk and Arlong. He couldn't let Mihawk die now, and Arlong, well he can fuck off, but he felt sort of responsible for him for the time being. Arlong was the first to rush Zephyr not knowing full well who this man was. He found out quickly that he was severely outmatched as he was flattened with a stomp in mere milliseconds. Even Mihawk, who charged the admiral, found that his blade was deflected easily and met a powerful punch squarely on his jaw. Within seconds, Marine Admiral Zephyr has defeated Arlong in his prime and Mihawk during his younger days. Dracula Mihawk, you were supposed to be one of those dogs that the world government was going to bring in. Guess your answer is as clear as day. As he prepared the cuffs, they were knocked off of his hands by a man with a straw hat. A jet stamp on Monkey D. Luffy has returned. Who might you be and how did you bypass my observation? Zephyr stated, slightly intrigued by the new arrival. But Luffy did not have time to chat, so instead of wasting time, Luffy bombarded Zephyr with a rain of punches. Gomu Gomu no Gatling. Zephyr covered his face and body with both arms as the punches had some weight within them. Though as soon as the barrage ended, the dust cleared out. His two prisoners as well as the straw hat fellow were gone. He smirked to himself and closed his eyes, sensing the trio in the distance. Luffy had bought himself enough time to retrieve Arlong and Mihawk. He would run faster if he would drop Arlong. No, that would be wrong maybe, he should leave the giant blade. No, Mihawk won't be Mihawk without his beloved blade. So now he was stuck carrying dead weight. In the horizon he can finally see the red force. Shanks, let's go. Screamed Luffy at the top of his lungs. Despite the distance, he could see that the red force had been fully coated already. Luffy you dumbus. I said be good. Shanks wasn't actually understanding why the Marines were demanding for him to anchor at port, but now he knew the reason. Luffy had done something real stupid. So Shanks had been conversing with a Marine who had been forcing him to anchor, and instead of continuing diplomacy, he socked him in the face. Luffy tossed Arlong and Mihawk on the ship, panting frantically as he ran at full speed. We got to go now. All hands on deck men. Commanded Shanks as he could see a purple streak coming swiftly their way. He was not going to let them go easily, and the red force just needed a little extra time before it could fully submerge. Shanks pulled out his blade, Griffin, and disappeared in a red streak of his own. As the red force was going down into the ocean, Zephyr had caught up, attempting to stop the pirates from escaping, although before he could make contact with the pirate ship, he was met mid-air by a red-haired pirate. The Marine Admiral suddenly found himself pushed slightly backwards, giving the pirate ship enough time to submerge. "I'm Marine." With that simple exclamation, the red-haired pirate switched direction mid-air and dove after his ship. Red hair. The hell? Zephyr exclaimed out loud as he landed on the port of Sabaody. Two pirates actually slightly altered his trajectory. This could only mean one thing, he needs to get stronger, maybe even take up Vegapunk in his offer for a powerful mechanical arm that could enhance his own strength. Just maybe. Aboard the Red Force. Shanks finally penetrated the bubble, joining the people on deck of the Red Force. Luffy smiled at the pirate captain, where Shanks had been panting heavily from the clash with the Marine Admiral. "Thanks Shanks." Luffy said as he sighed in relief. He would have been happy to take care of Zephyr in a similar manner, but Shanks was strong, really strong. He was going to be an emperor after all. "Well, it was all of our hide that was in danger, so I had to do what a captain needs to do." Shanks states, causing his crew to laugh at their captain. Despite his light-hearted nature, Shanks took his job seriously. "So now we'll be heading to Fishman Island." "Captain, we have a problem." Ben Beckham stated as he looked through a periscope. "What is it, Ben?" Shanks asked as he was handed the periscope. Ben pointed directly in front of them, several hundred yards in the distance he could see a Jolly Roger of a very powerful personality. "Crap. What? Why? Who is it?" Luffy was handed the periscope and it took a minute to focus on the Jolly Roger in the distance. "By the way, how did your meeting go with Rayleigh?" Luffy focused on the Jolly Roger that waved on top of a bunch of ships. "Okay, it's a big pirate crew, what's the big deal?" Shanks slapped his forehead. "It went fine. Wait, how did you know? Never mind, just look again. Carefully." At this point Arlong and Mihawk finally came to their senses. But Arlong had found his hands were not bound. A strange feeling, especially at the presence of humans, it was like they thought of him as equal, almost as if he was not just a fishman filth. In the presence of humans, his people are treated as nothing but animals, objects to be possessed. But in the presence of the Straw Hat Man, he was not having this feeling. Why? Mihawk shook out of his daze, finally regaining his footing. He mentally beat himself up for not reacting properly to the situation. He ended up being manhandled by a Marine Admiral. He needs to be better, he has to be better. Luffy smiled at Arlong and Mihawk who were finally getting back on their feet. He then finally looked again as instructed, and now he could see why Ben and even Shanks was so worried. For several hundred yards from them, the Jolly Roger that currently was in Fishman Island belonged to none other than Edward Newgate, or as the name he was best known as. Whitebeard. Oh no. King Neptune. I have brought with me an interesting man. Queen Atohem opened the palace throne room without knocking. Behind the door it revealed King Neptune, sitting mightily on his throne. His younger muscular frame was a surprise to see the king having a 10-pack and long flowing blonde hair. He was so used to seeing the king as a plump-up old man, a shadow of his glory days, that this was a sight to see. And in front of him was a giant being, a monster amongst men, 13 years younger. It was none other than Edward Newgate, Whitebeard. He wielded his world-shattering Bacento on right hand as he seemed to be discussing an important matter with the king. Queen Atohem. Please join me in the back room swiftly. This intrusion is unforgivable. Exclaimed King Neptune. Luffy was taken aback, but Queen Atohem happily followed her husband to the back room behind the throne. It was there where their conversation could be heard outside. Despite trying to whisper, Luffy could hear what they were talking about, and so could Newgate. "My love, I told you that I can't have you intruding like this, especially when I have a guest. Oh you big fish you, this one is important. I can feel it. Alright fine, what is it with him that made you interrupt my meeting with Whitebeard, our protector?" Well, I felt a certain way about him, it was as if the gods have blessed him with a powerful purpose. Do you get what I mean? Arlong, you mean to tell me you interrupted my important meeting with a feeling? Why yes, of course. Do you question me? Queen Atohem raised her voice slightly, causing the king to back down a little. Of course not. Very well, let's hear what this man's purpose is. Edward Newgate was on a different level. His powerful haki naturally emitted from him, weak beings would eventually pass out from being exposed to him for too long. Luffy was using a little more haki than he would in order to contradict the power that Whitebeard was emitting. He stared him dead in the eye, and the pirate emperor started right back at him. Luffy crossed his arms with a serious look on his face, while Whitebeard held his Bacento on his right hand, standing firmly in front of Luffy. The duo had been listening in on the king and queen's conversation, and they couldn't help but snicker a little. "So, you must be something else to influence the queen as such," Whitebeard began. Luffy couldn't help but mentally slap himself. He was supposed to go into Fishman Island, pay respect to the king, and leave. Now he was morally obliged to assist the queen so that she does not die, take care of a certain annoying fishman, and now deal with Whitebeard's suspicious gaze. He quickly extended his observation haki, trying to locate Mihawk just in case he would need backup. He found him at the entrance of the palace, waiting to be granted passage to the palace just like everyone else. Luffy wondered if a fight broke out between him and Whitebeard, if Shanks would intervene or if the man would let him get beaten down. "I suppose, I don't believe we've met. Monkey D. Luffy is my name." Luffy extended his hands. He wasn't only trying to be courteous as to defuse the tense situation, he was also trying to see if hand-to-hand contact would trigger his vision. Whitebeard stared him down a little bit longer but decided to take the handshake. "Garp's brat, eh? I'm Edward Newgate, you can call me Whitebeard." He firmly grasped the hand of the scrawny teenager. What surprised the emperor was that Luffy returned the firm grip. "So what brings you to my territory?" "Grandson, and just passing through really," replied Luffy, though in his mind, he was very confused. Where was the vision he saw earlier from shaking the queen's hands? Was it some sort of selective permeability? "Whenever it's convenient. Damn you puppeteer." Whitebeard slammed his Bacento on the ground, causing a small ripple to form around Luffy. "Be on your way then, your presence annoys me." Luffy was about to respond, but the situation was abruptly interrupted by one of the most powerful members of the Sun Pirates, a large blue whale shark who was hailed as the strongest of the fishman population, Knight of the Sea Jinbei. This disruption caused King Neptune and Queen Atohem to return from their meeting. Both of which were very confused, then concerned, and lastly alarmed. Jinbei's hands were covered in fishman blood. "King Neptune, Queen Atohem Fisher Tiger. He's dying." Suddenly everyone was in overdrive. Many things happened at once. King Neptune summoned his carriage, bringing Queen Atohem and Jinbei with him. Despite being quick swimmers, the carriage would still be a faster way to the Fishman district. Luffy and Whitebeard were left in the throne room and they both looked confused on what to do next. "I'm going to follow them," Luffy began, and to his surprise, Whitebeard nodded his head. Then the emperor sat on the stairs that led to the king's throne, caressing his beard as he fell deep in thoughts. After some time, he decided to go outside. Outside the palace, the red-haired pirates were just making their way inside the castle when a group of fishermen rushed past them. Amongst the people were the king and the queen. They did not stop for a conversation as they immediately boarded a carriage and rushed off somewhere. Luffy would casually pass them as well, saying something to Mihawk, in which case he nodded and disappeared towards the hardshell tower. Luffy then glowed a pink color and steam emitted from his body and he was gone, following after the carriage. Shanks looked at his men to find an answer, in which case they were as confused as he was. To make matters worse, here comes Whitebeard, who was as confused as he was. "Old man," Shanks exclaimed. Despite being younger and possibly weaker than the strongest man alive, he still carried an aura of confidence in himself. "Red-haired brat. Who was that kid with you?" Shanks was surprised by the old man ignoring his disrespect. Luffy must have really left an impression. Fishman District. "Boss, what happened?" Arlong had arrived only to hear screams from the Sun Pirate headquarters. He immediately rushed to the building only to find Fisher Tiger bleeding out. He laid on a table barely able to breathe. "Humans, they sold me out." Fisher Tiger could barely speak and Aladdin placed his hands on the man's shoulder, taking over the story. "Arlong, I am glad you are okay. The last time we heard from you, we were told that you have been captured by humans." Aladdin began by greeting his fellow Sun Pirate commander. "What happened to Boss?" Fisher Tiger was atrocious. A human was returned to her homeland Full Shout village, but the boss was sold out by the other villagers to the world government. "We were ambushed by hundreds of marines." He then brought his arms forward. "I give my blood to you, Boss Fisher Tiger, but it will not be enough. We found a pack of human blood in the marine battleship that we stole. This will be enough to save your life." "No." Fisher Tiger mustered up enough energy to slap the human blood from Aladdin's hands. What would be life-saving blood ended up on the floor, staining the ground everyone stood on. "Aladdin, you are very brave for doing that, but I refuse to take the blood of which took so much from me." As he began relaying the information of his true origin, Jinbei returned with King Neptune and Queen Atohim. The Sun Pirates were about to kneel and Fisher Tiger attempted to get up to show his respect, but King Neptune held up his hands. "No, please, just tell us how we can help." The king had a lot of respect for Fisher Tiger. The man who freed his people from the humans, creating a revolution like no other. Even he could attest to the man's amazing character and drive. "King Neptune, Queen Atohim, this will be my resting place. I can't let go of my hatred against humans and therefore I can't accept their blood." He then coughed up more blood, barely able to muster enough strength to speak. "For you see," before he could continue, the moment was interrupted by one straw-wet Luffy, who was standing in between Jinbei and Arlong. "Why not? Why not take the blood that can save your life?" Luffy probed. He extended his own forearm, indicating that they should take his blood. "Take mine, my blood type is universal." Despite the shock of his sudden arrival, everyone looked at Fisher Tiger for his answer. King Neptune was about to say something as he looked to be fuming, but Queen Atohim held him back. "Wait," she whispered to her beloved. This eased the king slightly, allowing the conversation to commence. "Humans, you only see us as animals. There will never be a world where humans and fishmen can coexist. I have seen horrible things that humans do to my people. They kill us for sport, mocked our appearance for being blue, green, red. Worse is when they flay our people for fucking wall decoration." Fisher Tiger began to go off. His life-threatening injuries were now dissipating in his mind as anger filled his thoughts. Blood began to quickly pour out of his wounds due to the outburst. Imagine this, Mujiwara, a world where humans rode us as if we did not have thoughts of our own. Our women were treated like exotic sex slaves for the pleasure of those monsters. Tell me how this wrong can be right. I get it, I get your pain." Luffy began. "What you saw in your life is the lowest that our species can go. We are not all like that. Take Whitebeard for example. He could have left Fishman Island vulnerable, but instead he decided to take it under his wing, as his territory. And he does not gain anything from claiming it. His actions are strictly to protect your people from those who have ill will. Plus, more recently I was involved in the Reverie, where 5 nations actively advocated against the segregation laws against the fishman population." He was about to continue, but Arlong suddenly spoke up. "Boss Fisher Tiger, this human is different. He saved me from a lifetime of servitude. I was going to be a slave as I was captured mere days ago, and he punished the human who attempted to own me and did not ask for anything in return, nor did he show any animosity towards me." Arlong then looked at Luffy and gave him a weak smile. "My hands were never bound." He held out his wrist to show everyone that no rope was tied around him. "Take his blood, boss, please." Luffy then awaited Fisher Tiger's answer. His first thought was how different Arlong was before becoming a human-hating scumbag who subdued Nami's village. This Arlong was sincere in his world, even being open to receiving the aid of a human. In his timeline, Arlong would massacre his own people before any of them could think about working with a human. Maybe this is someone else completely, not twisted by the death of Fisher Tiger. "I'm not here to gain anything, nothing that I do today will be done to further my own ambition. I am doing this from my heart. So please let me save your life." Fisher Tiger took a moment to gaze into the eyes of the human before him. He tried to read him, trying to understand why he is doing what he is doing. But nothing but clear thoughts could be seen behind his eyes. Just a pure soul trying to help. So without wasting any more time, Fisher Tiger laid back on the table he was laying on and extended his arm. "Alright," was his answer. Queen Atohim quickly took control. "Clear the room except Mujiwara-san and Aladdin-san," Queen Atohim commanded, causing everyone to go out of the room in a flurry. Arlong looked at Luffy one more time before heading outside. Despite the assistance of a human in this situation, there was still something that built up within him. The humans that betrayed Fisher Tiger. Arlong exited the room and gathered his belongings, he had somewhere to be. Several hours passed and everyone waited patiently outside of the Sun Pirate base. Jinbei had been conversing with King Neptune inside his carriage. The other members of the Sun Pirate were phasing around nervously. Finally Queen Atohim exited the building, everyone suddenly became alert looking at her bloody gloves. "He's going to be okay. But he needs to rest for some time," Queen Atohim proclaimed to the gleeful response of the entire Sun Pirates, along with King Neptune. "Can we see him, darling?" King Neptune asked. Jinbei remained by him trying to see the captain. "Alright, but two at a time please." Before she could finish, Jinbei had entered the facility leaving the group behind. King Neptune followed behind him and was also interested in finding out if the hero was okay. Inside the room, Aladdin could be seen slouched down on the floor taking a quick nap. The exhausting day finally caught up to him. Luffy was sitting beside Fisher Tiger, conversing with the man he just saved. "Yeah, and I had a buddy who was a swordsman and he ended up beating a stone man. Not just any stone man but a giant stone man." "Well, how did he get him to come out?" Fisher Tiger had bandages all over his body, covering his fresh wounds. The blood transfusion from Luffy and Aladdin saved his life. "He cut him until he revealed himself, mid-air." Luffy made a cutting gesture mid-air. "Whoa." Fisher Tiger began to chuckle, but quickly groaned in pain as his wounds began to hurt. "Boss, be careful." Jinbei joins him quickly. Yeah, Jinbei, I am okay." Fisher Tiger once again tried to get up but could not. "Sorry King Neptune, I would kneel if I could." "Nonsense Fisher Tiger, you have done so much for this kingdom already," said the king. "Thank you." He then surveyed his guest. "Mujiwara, if it wasn't for Arlong, I would not even consider this. But you alone have opened my eyes to a new world, one where we can all coexist. By the way, where is Arlong?" "He left in a hurry earlier, I couldn't ask him where he was going." Jinbei began to, which Fisher Tiger grabbed his shirt, using what little energy he had, pulling Jinbei closer. "Get him back, he's going for revenge." "I know him," exclaimed the Sun Pirate captain. Yes boss." Jinbei said shakily, finally understanding the situation. He ran back outside hounding orders to the Sun Pirates. "They won't be quick enough, where is he going?" Luffy asked. "Full Shout Island, but Mujiwara you will need assistance." Jinbei was busy preparing the Sun Pirate to worry more about what Luffy was going to do. Instead of chasing after the man, he got his men together. Luffy had dashed through Fishman Island. Being underwater slowed him down slightly, but he managed to have at least 80% of his speed. Arlong was going to do something stupid, he just knows it. As fate would have it, Mihawk joined him in his pursuit. Where to? The swordsman had just finished his mission when he joined Luffy. "Arlong's gonna get himself killed on Full Shout Island," replied Luffy, determined to reach the fishmen before the worst could happen. "Got it?" Suddenly Mihawk sneezed. Full Shout Island. Arlong currently drifted underneath a marine battleship. He did not care for his life, as all he cared about was obtaining revenge for his boss. What the Marines did was unforgivable. He stacked the Marine ship, waiting for an opportunity to jump them at their most vulnerable. He then found his moment when the majority of the Marines were below deck and only petty officers were cleaning the deck. Arlong swam for some momentum, then jumped aboard the Marine ship. There he took care of the closest Marine to him by tossing them overboard. Another Marine tried to rush to the alarm system, to which he threw a sword at him, hitting his right leg. Arlong moved on to two more Marines by slamming their heads against each other. A Marine did manage to sound the alarm as Arlong made easy work of the small fodders. "It's Arlong the Sorcerer," exclaimed one of the Marine captains on a messenger snail. "Shut up," exclaimed Arlong as he grabbed the man's head and slammed it across the deck. "You shouldn't have done that," said the man on the other line of the call. It only took a few seconds, but a flash of light emitted from behind Arlong, then he found his face planted on the deck of the ship. "Told you," said the same voice as what was on the line. "Who the hell are you?" Arlong struggled under the power of the new arrival. "Vice Admiral Lino is the name." The Vice Admiral held him down with one hand, speaking very slowly. "Arlong the Saw, you are under my command." Two new figures joined them on the ship. The man with the straw hat was the one who spoke up, claiming the fishman as one of his own men. "Friends of yours?" Borsellino asked as he looked at his captive. "TSK," was Arlong's only response. "You guys asking to go to prison too, huh?" Wait a minute, is that Dracula Mihawk? Borsellino looked at Mihawk, then the man with the straw hat. And you must be, who cares, just put your hands in the air and wait your turn. Though it was clear what the answer of the two men were, as Borsellino found half of his face clean dried off. It was definitely a punch coming from the straw hat person. If this was done by a blade, his head would be clean off. Now why would you do that? Borsellino removed his fedora, placing it on the ground. He let go of Arlong for a moment before dissipating into light particles. Luffy and Mihawk stood back to back as they anticipated the first move of the Vice Admiral. A light beam suddenly emitted from the sky and was aimed for Mihawk, but due to his quick reflexes, he was able to cut the energy with Yoru. Though his swing was too wide, Borsellino appeared below him with a powerful uppercut, then quickly disappearing once more. Mihawk fell back slightly but regained his position. It was Luffy's turn now as Borsellino decided to rain him with hundreds of light particles. Luffy matched the energy with a barrage of punches. Despite his quickness, he could not catch all the light beams. Those that were able to get through grazed him slightly, but he was able to put up armament hockey to minimize the damage. Borsellino materialized beside him, mocking him. Tell me, how come I never heard of you before, Mugiwara? His notoriety will only continue to rise as more and more people call him by his signature look, his straw hat. Luffy took a wild swing to the light user, only to hit nothing but air. Borsellino appeared once more, this time standing above Luffy's extended arm. Too slow. Though the Vice Admiral found himself near the sharp end of a black blade. He attempted to dissipate once more into light particles, but his body would not follow. Oh. Borsellino looked down on his feet as Mugiwara held it with armament-infused hands. He was still able to lean backwards so that the blade did not cut him. Luckily he cleared enough space to only be cut slightly across his chest. Mihawk quickly retrieved his place, giving room for Luffy to pull the leg of Borsellino and slam him against the deck of the ship. But that wasn't the end of the group's combination, as Arlong joined them by performing a double leg drop kick on him. Borsellino coughed up blood for the first time in a long time. He lost that battle due to his cockiness, if only he ended the trio the first time he saw them. Now he found himself unable to move as the trio ran away from their victory. Why did they not finish him? He wouldn't find out that day, maybe another time. For now he will take a nap. On one side, more marine ships approached them, but luckily on another, allies arrived. Luffy patted Mihawk and Arlong's back as the arrival of the Sun Pirates provided a way for them to escape. Hang on. Luffy wrapped his legs along Arlong and Mihawk's waist. He then grabbed the two highest points of the marine ship and finally catapulted them to the direction of the Sun Pirates. As they landed on deck, Jinbei quickly gave the orders to return home. "We're going home, boys," Jinbei stated as the Sun Pirates escaped the marine ambush. Luffy gave both Arlong and Mihawk a high five as the trio managed to incapacitate a marine vice admiral, even for just a moment. Jinbei couldn't help but smile, looking at the trio. Arlong, who had the most deep-rooted hate for humans, working alongside them, laughing, joking, and even having fun. "Arlong the Saw, will you join my Straw Hat Pirates?" Luffy finally said, causing the Sun Pirates to stop everything that they were doing. They awaited their comrade's answer. Arlong looked shocked, first looking at Jinbei, who had happy tears in his eyes, then at Mihawk, who gave him an approving nod. Then finally at Luffy. Sure, he had his initial reservations against Arlong, the bastard was the man that caused so much pain to Nami. But this Arlong was still confused, never even crossing paths with Nami before. This Arlong was someone else completely, someone that can be influenced to do good instead of wasting away his talents. This is why Luffy came to a decision to add him on. The more the merrier after all. "I will join you, Captain," was Arlong's response, causing a massive eruption of cheer amongst those who were present. But that the Straw Hat Pirates grew once more, with Captain Monkey D. Luffy, Dracula Mihawk, and the newest member, Arlong the Saw. "Good," Luffy replied as he shook the fishman's hands. In another life, they were mortal enemies. The fishman was an oppressor, controlling a village through fear. This was not the Arlong he knew in his life, this is a new Arlong, a member of the Straw Hat Pirates. Ryugu Kingdom Castle. "Sorry, Whitebeard, it was quite lucky that we were able to save Fisher Tiger." King Neptune returned to his throne room, continuing their conversation from earlier. "It's alright, King Neptune. So what's your answer?" Whitebeard had asked something earlier to the king. Shanks had joined the meeting between the two figures, intrigued by Whitebeard's proposition. "Of course." King Neptune took a moment, but his answer was quite clear. In a different timeline, events will not happen like this. King Neptune would have said no at the death of Fisher Tiger. Whitebeard would have gone on his way, understanding the events that transpired was bigger than his ambition. "Not that I feel like I can influence your decision." Shanks began as the event that occurred in Fishman's district gave Whitebeard enough time to discuss his plans with Shanks. "But I feel that he is the closest man to learning the true history. Not that I've seen it, but I feel that Whitebeard can be that man to change this world." Then King Neptune finally gave his answer. Swayed by his gratitude for Whitebeard's assistance, as well as the words of encouragement provided by Shanks. Yes, Whitebeard, the entire Fishman Island will sponsor your conquest to be the next pirate king. Excellent. Edward Newgate had a massive smile on his face, as now is the time for him to make his move. With the backing of his powerful allies and divisions, the entire forces of Fishman Island along with his many allies. Whitebeard will find the One Piece. Back at Fishman Island, at an undisclosed location. A bullhead shark fishman by the name of Vander Deckenix cursed a man known as Mihawk. He stared at where his hands used to be, trembling as they were no longer attached to his body. Through his life of slave trading, bribery and money laundering, he felt unstable, but this swordsman comes out of nowhere and swiftly chops off both of his hands. Why? He asked the swordsman. To which he replied with a shrug before disappearing in a single bound. Curse you. Curse you until your death. Mihawk wiped his nose as he wondered what suddenly gave him the chill. Someone must be thinking ill of him. You okay there? Arlong asked. I suppose. Responded the swordsman. The journey back to Fishman Island was a lively one. Arlong and Mihawk were getting to know each other better, and what better way to do so than to beat each other up. Luffy had been chatting along with Aladdin, who were both very grateful for what Luffy was able to do for them. And in such a short amount of time, he managed to earn the respect of all people in the Fishman Kingdom. If you ever need us to do anything for you, just let us know. Jin stated, having a massive smile on his face. Thank you Jin, Aladdin. I'll keep that in mind. Thus their journey ended when they finally arrived in Ryugu Kingdom, where King Neptune, Queen Atohim, Shanks, Fisher Tiger, and Whitebeard were enjoying a meal. Luffy and Jin joined the meeting at the invitation of King Neptune, and the rest of the group waited outside. Mugiwara greeted Whitebeard, who was in a very good mood. In the dining room, King Neptune sat at the helm, with Queen Atohim on his right and Whitebeard on his left. Shanks sat beside Whitebeard, and Fisher Tiger sat beside Queen Atohim. Whitebeard, replied Luffy, still confused at what Whitebeard was on about. So why is my presence requested? Asked Luffy. As soon as they arrived, a messenger intercepted them immediately. He was summoned by King Neptune for a very important request. Thank you for joining us Mugiwara. I want to preface everything that will happen next by thanking you for everything you have done for my kingdom, my people, to our very own hero, Fisher Tiger. Luffy was then patted in the back by Fisher Tiger, who gave him a wide grin. The man lived because of him and he was very thankful for it. We asked for your presence because Whitebeard has a proposition. Began King Neptune, where he then handed the conversation to Whitebeard, who stood up from his seat. Mugiwara, before your arrival, I had requested for the assistance of the Fishman Kingdom to assist me in my conquest of the New World and eventually in learning true history. I am the closest man to One Piece and yet I still don't have any of the road poneglyphs. My former crewmates back in my days as a member of the Rocks Pirates have obtained one each and yet I'm supposed to be the closest. Luffy did not like where this was going and yet he let the man continue. I asked for your assistance Mugiwara. You have shown me a great deal of your potential and in time you could develop into one of my most powerful allies. So I ask for you to join me and be there when I discover the One Piece and then crowned as the King of Pirates. No thanks. Everyone had a deadpan look except for Queen Atohim, who was expecting his answer. You can't be the next King of Pirates because I will. Proclaimed Luffy, to everyone's surprise. Then everyone looked at Whitebeard, who had his head down. His expression was hard to read. Was he mad? Was he sad? Or was he just not feeling anything? Then he immediately released a wave of his world-renowned haki before swinging his Bisento at Luffy. The man with the straw hat put his arms up to cover his face and covered his forearm in armament haki. The shockwave of the powerful swing and Luffy's defense caused fishmen and merfolk alike to pass out, even miles outside of the palace. Then the world's strongest man burst out laughing, a hearty laugh that confused the room. It was just a test from an old man. Alright brat, have it your way. I like your fire, very well then you are quite bold for your age, yet I understand your desires. Just know that in the open sea, where you find yourself getting in my way, we won't be on such friendly terms. Whitebeard then took his seat once more, retiring his Bisento on his side. Got it? Luffy shook his arm, recovering from the impact. His forearm throbbed as it was extremely painful to receive a direct hit from the most powerful man in the world. So that was it? Asked Luffy, trying to remain cool despite internally freaking out. He was also a bit anxious to move on from Fishman Island. He was on a mission after all. Ah yes, well if you wish to join us for the rest of the meeting, you are more than welcome to do so. King Neptune replied, although still a bit shocked. I'm okay King Neptune, thank you. He then looked at Shanks, who seemed to be in awe at his boldness. When can we leave? Actually that was another thing I wanted to talk to you about now that this is all out there. I can't take you to Whole Cake Island. I have some unfinished business I need to attend to, but Fisher Tiger has offered to take you there instead. What does Shanks need to do that is so important? I owe you more than my life, Mugiwara, so let me and the Sun Pirates take you to Whole Cake Island. We will even wait for a way for you to escape with whatever it is you need from there," stated Fisher Tiger, to which Whitebeard perked up. "Linland's territory, huh? Starting early, I see, Mugiwara," Whitebeard commented, reminiscing on his experience with his fellow emperor. She was, of course, the strongest woman in the entire world, and Whitebeard along with Kado would be the only people that could stand on even grounds with her for now. "No, not yet, I won't go after the road poneglyph yet. And don't worry about my escape, Fisher Tiger, I have a way to get out of Toto Land." He then decided that it was time to move on. "King Neptune, Queen Atoham. Thank you for your hospitality. Shanks and Whitebeard, I'll see you in the open seas." He then left the room, with Fisher Tiger and Jin following behind him, after also saying their goodbyes. "Interesting brat," said Whitebeard. "If all things goes well, then Linland would probably stunt the growth of the young Straw Hat Pirate. But it seems that Red-Haired was keen on seeing him succeed." "Told you so," replied Shanks with a smile on his face. As Luffy walked away, he couldn't help but think of a certain man who used to be his captain. It was like Luffy carried his aura, the will of Gold D. Roger. It took some time to prepare the ships for a journey through the new world. The Sun Pirates worked tirelessly to ensure that they were more than prepared, especially to where they were going. Luffy currently sat on a ledge across the port, waiting, thinking to himself. What does Shanks want to do that he couldn't keep his words? I thought Whitebeard wanted to make a family, did I seriously fuck up everything so bad that this had to happen? I need some answers, damn it. He scratched his head, deep in thoughts. He continued to shake his arms as the stinging pain continued to bother him. That damned Whitebeard can really pack a punch. But there was still the problem of this damned new timeline. Even with his recent acquisition of some powerful allies, he still needed more, he still had to do something before he really needed to make his moves. How long did he need exactly? His most powerful crew member in his original timeline was Zoro. At this moment he was a little squirt, probably still training to master his three-sword style. Then there was Sanji, who was being tortured by his family. Fuck, how did he know this? Sanji never told him. But if he makes a move for Sanji, then Sanji won't be able to grow as a person like he previously did. Nami is going to grow up with a mother since Arlong never becomes a tyrant. Usopp is still lying his way through Syrup Island, he needs to get in contact with Kuro before he docks in Syrup Village. Maybe he can save Chopper, but if he does, then he never grows to love helping people and instead grows to resent them. Frankie would witness the death of his teacher, Tom, and grow to become a criminal leader that mostly causes nuisance in Water 7. Robin, well, Robin is on the run with a bounty of 80 million beery. He will definitely look for her. Then there was Brook, still floating aimlessly in the Florian Triangle. Moria will get a piece of his mind soon, but he needed to get to Brook also. Otherwise everyone needed to live their life as they were. Despite the loss and suffering that they will endure, it is necessary for their growth. Tough pill to swallow, but it was the right thing to do, right? "Captain, the Sun Pirates are ready for departure." Mihawk approached him, allowing him to snap out of his thoughts. Finally it was time to set sail, but first he needed to make sure his friends were going to be taken care of. Queen Atoham dismissed herself from the meeting and joined the group. She decided to bid Luffy farewell for his journey. "Be careful out there, Mugiwara-san, though I suppose you will be able to take care of yourself." She really was a genuinely kind person, he could just feel it in the way she spoke and the way she carried herself. "If you ever need our help for anything, here." The queen handed him a small yet elongated messenger snail with a golden color. "This communication device allows you access to all of our messenger system within the Fishman Kingdom. All you have to do is say call in the person's name." She eagerly awaited him to try out the device. "Go on then." "Okay, call Fisher Tiger." The snail began to vibrate, then within seconds, Fisher Tiger was being called by his crew members for a call. "What you mean?" Fisher Tiger could be heard yelling aboard the pirate ship. "Anyone who knows my personal messenger snail is aboard this ship." "It's ringing, Captain," replied Jin. They were probably across from each other on the ship, thus all the yelling. Luffy and Queen Atoham looked at each other, snickering. Then Fisher Tiger picked up the call. "Hello, who is this?" But Luffy hung up the call. "What the hell? Who called me just now? Damn kids," screamed Fisher Tiger aboard the ship, causing both Luffy and the Queen to share a hearty laugh. "Well, be on your way then, Mugiwara-san, we are truly grateful for everything you have done for us. This will go a long way in my mission to bring Fishman Island to the surface and finally join the world." "Thank you, Queen Atoham." Luffy began, and then he had an idea. "Actually, there is something I will need from you." He began, to which the Queen actively listened to his request. "My friend Brook is currently stuck in the Florian Triangle. Please bring him to Sabaody, there have him find a woman by the name of Shaki, and he should be okay from there." Then he continued with a second request. "The second thing is a girl named Nico Robin, she is currently a fugitive with a bounty of 80 million birri. If any of your contacts manages to find her, please let me know. After all you have done for us, I will get someone on this as soon as I can." With a final wave, Luffy joined the members aboard the pirate ship. Their stopover at Fishman Island finally reached its momentary conclusion. "Luffy, you mentioned how you have a way out of Todo Land, how do you plan on doing it?" Fisher Tiger had joined Luffy in the dining quarter, every member of the Sun Pirates were filtering in and out, taking turns eating the usual grub that the ship's chef would muster. "You know, I'm supposedly very mysterious." Luffy then smirked. "I'd like to keep it that way." Meanwhile Arlong was laughing at something Jin said, and Mihawk had a smirk while twirling around his wine glass. Aladdin then punched Jinbe in the chest, causing a brawl to occur. Despite punching each other, everyone just laughed it off and went about their day. Luffy admired Fisher Tiger's crew, he wondered if he would ever get back to how it used to be. The Straw Hat Pirates know he needs to dream bigger Straw Hat Grand Armada. Yes, that's it. Marine HQ, Marineford. I have summoned you here today because of some news. Take it as you like. The man sitting at the head of the office was very muscular with a wide chest. His spiky white hair gave off his mighty presence. He is the current fleet admiral of the entire marine forces, his name is Kong. In front of him was a tall, fair-skinned muscular man with braided black goatee, his presence matched that of even the highest-ranking military officer of the marine forces. He was known as the Golden Buddha. "Please continue Fleet Admiral Kong," began the man as he crossed his legs and folded his arms. Now Admiral Sengoku, none of that formalities, it is just us," replied the Fleet Admiral, who removed his coat. "This conversation is confidential to the highest of magnitude." "Understood. I will be moving up to a non-combatant role in the coming year and I wish to recommend you to the Gorosei as my successor." Kong then got up and looked outside his window, overlooking the entire Marine HQ. But Sengoku tried to protest with the decision, although Kong wouldn't have any of it. "That's final Sengoku, there is no better man for the job than you." "What about Garp?" argued Sengoku, as his friend would be the perfect choice to take such a high-ranking role. "Garp is simply not responsible enough for the job. You on the other hand have enough accolades under your belt and quite frankly, the balls to do what others cannot." Kong slammed his hands against the table. "You are my choice and that is finally." "Yes, sir," replied Sengoku, although he still felt like it should go to someone else. Garp was the man who disbanded the Rocks Pirates, took in Gold D. Roger. He was the hero of the Marines, and Sengoku had always looked up to him despite the man insisting that they are equal. Though the man refused to attain the ranking of admiral, content in remaining a vice admiral. "Good on you Sengoku, now who might be some prime candidates to take your place as an admiral?" The fleet admiral proceeded to take his seat. "3 prime candidates in my mind. 4 if he was counting Garp, but the man simply refused to be directly under the Gorosei." "Go on then, I'm listening." Kong took out a cigar and began to take puffs of it. "Vice Admiral Kuzan, Vice Admiral Borsellino, and from the reserve, Isso." Then he began to list their qualities in order to bolster their case to be the next Marine Admiral. Admiral Z and Admiral Akainu are both very high on Kuzan. They think he has the making of the next great admiral, his Ice Loja Devil Fruit is also one of the most powerful abilities known to us. Then there's Isso from the reserve, he is a very powerful asset who has yet to be mobilized, we have been keeping him on the shelf so that our enemies do not discover his existence, for he can change the tide of the battle in an instant. Finally, there is Borsellino, who is very passive about most things, but his Light Devil Fruit is considered to be the deadliest in our ranking although he never really put much effort into anything he does. I heard he got beaten by some Straw Hat brat, did red-haired Shanks really put a number on him?" asked the fleet admiral. "No sir, it was a new pirate, not known by any of our sources. From Borsellino's report, this man couldn't be older than 20 years old, maybe younger. He was a master of armament, observation, and even conqueror's hockey. He brings with him a crew of currently Arlong the Saw and Dracula Mihawk. A headache, but shouldn't be an issue." Borsellino said that he underestimated them and got his ass handed to him. Interesting choices, I wonder who this new person is. Let Spandine know that I need this kid to be taken care of right away. In the matter of your successor, we will bring it to the attention of Z and Akainu. He then stood up and indicated that the meeting was over. "You are dismissed Admiral Sengoku." "Yes, sir." The admiral made his exit, doing as the fleet admiral instructed. First to tell Spandine of his new mission, marked urgent, and then to let his colleague know of the new changes in their rank. Florian Triangle. Yo-ho-ho-ho. A record for yourself. Well done, well done. A tall skeletal man began to play a game known as How Far Can He Hit a Rock with a Plank. Almost 40 years of mindlessly floating about the endless foggy sea has caused the former vice captain of the Rumber Pirate to do anything and everything to keep himself entertained. For he was the man who ate the soul fruit, and therefore as he died, his soul simply returned to his rotting corpse. Thus he was now a skeleton man, living an empty life of loneliness. As the skeleton man looked around him, emptiness, with his only company being the fog which covered everything. Fog, always just fog. He yelled out before cutting a horizontal line across the thick fog. He managed to split the air, but it just returned to how it was before. Gahh. He burst out, once more falling into despair. His situation was hopeless, he was hopeless. As he closed his eyes thinking one day he could be saved, a vision of a man with a straw hat passed through his mind, then emptiness. That was new, but he took no heed to the vision as he just wanted to dream again, to be back to how it used to be. Brook fell asleep, once again drifting into his usual dream of his crew happily singing and laughing. With that, a single tear fell from his empty eye socket. How it used to be. Nanohana, Alabasta. Her jet black hair shined against the sun as the young woman clung to the wall behind her. She was gasping heavily as her pursuer was finally hot on her tail. Time is a fickle. Events happen in chronological order due to events lining up as they were intended. But once a time traveler interferes with the timeline, things will change from how it was before. The primary example was Nico Robin, who was supposed to be traveling the West Blue, along with the organization she joined in the year 1514. Although things change, for the intrusion of one, Straw Hat Luffy, created a shift in events where Robin's group were supposed to be diverted by Dracula Mihawk. The original path was somewhere in the Grand Line, but with the present such a powerful warlord, they had to shift course to the West Blue. But that couldn't happen, and Robin ended up continuing and meeting a terrible storm which separated her from her group. Now she was in a kingdom known as Alabasta, where her past has finally caught up with her. Her name was Nico Robin, then the demon child of O'Hara, and today might be her last, as the men of Spandine was finally closing in on her. What did I ever do to deserve this? My home, my family. She kept asking this to herself for years, ever since she began her run from the law. For over a decade she had been on the run, and now Spandine, CP9 leader and the orchestrator of annihilating her people, had finally found her. Look there, men, she must be here somewhere. Exclaimed Spandine, he was confidently smirking to himself, finally catching his most evasive fugitive yet. Come out wherever you are, demon. She panted heavily as the sound of soldiers' footsteps became closer and closer. Then nothing. Her ears perked up, trying to listen in on their conversation, but she could not hear anything. It was so frustrating, if only she could hear them. Somehow 1 second she couldn't hear them, and the next she could hear them clear as day. She took in the opportunity to listen in on the conversation of the Marines. Damn it. I am so close to cracking this case. Don't take this away from me, screamed Spandine, to which case the transponder snail replied something and Spandine toned down in his response. No sir. I understand sir, yes sir, right away. He hung up the snail and grabbed the first thing he could find and tossed it against the wall. The gun he picked up collapsed against the wall, metallic pieces flew all over the place. Men, head back, we've been reassigned to a mug. Something stupid about a straw hat. He then grabbed one of his finest soldiers and pulled him on the side. Listen here, Lucci. You find this bastard and you kill him before we make it halfway through the Grand Line. As soon as the hit is over on this straw hat bastard, we can head back here and hunt the demon brat. Yes, sir. The man known as Rob Lucci answered, adjusting his top hat. He then disappeared in a blur. The man was the best in CP9, and in terms of search and destroy, it was his favorite mission. Nico Robin collapsed on the floor, finally sighing in relief for even a moment. She was finally free, for now. As she was about to get up, a man hovered over her. He wore a thick overcoat for the desert weather, a cigar in his mouth and a golden hook on his left hand. Say, you wouldn't happen to know how to read poneglyph, would you? Several days later, Sun Pirates. Land ho, Captain. Screamed Aladdin. Mujiwara, this is Todo Land. Are you sure you don't wish for us to wait for your escape? Fisher Tiger asked. Aye, we'll be alright. Luffy jumped aboard a small dinghy. Arlong and Mihawk were already aboard, comfortably positioning themselves to the best that they can. Safe travels, Mujiwara. Goodbye, Fisher Tiger. The two men waved at each other and off they went. The Straw Hat Grand Armada could only grow from there, or they would die trying. Anything. The man with the straw hat was currently sitting behind a rock, though from his experience in Whole Cake Island, everything was alive. So the best way to find their mark was to split up. No, Captain, not on my end. Replied Arlong, talking through a mini messenger snail. They were given some supplies before leaving the Sun Pirates. These handy little snails made communication much easier for the trio. Northbound, Captain, I have eyes on the purple-haired big-nosed lady as you described. On the other line, Mihawk could hear two people snickering, one was Arlong and the other was Luffy. Charlotte Burleigh was a key piece to this mission, as she was going to grant them the necessary access to Charlotte Katakuri, the strongest commander under Big Mom. How exactly? Through the mirror world. Alright, Arlong rendezvous at Mihawk's location. Stated Luffy as he finally collected himself. Aye. Responded Arlong. Several minutes passed as Luffy and Arlong stealthily made their way through the seducing woods and met up with Mihawk. Hey Captain, she's just up ahead. Stated Mihawk, who pointed at a wooden area about 100 yards out. You think we should attack her? Yeah, I think so. With that, Luffy backhanded Mihawk, realizing exactly what was going on. His backhand connected with Mihawk's face, causing the illusion to fall apart. Behind the disguise was none other than the woman of interest. Her thick messy purple hair and plump eggplant-shaped nose began to bleed at the impact of Luffy's hand connecting with her face. How the hell Burleigh began, but Arlong immediately restrained her from escaping and also asking for help. Let me go now. Do you know who I am? I know this looks bad and I'm sorry for this, but I need access to the mirror world and I need you to get me Katakuri. Stated Luffy, who was crouched low as to not attract any more attention. In the seducing woods, Burleigh was queen. She controlled all the homies within the area, and without their leader, the homies didn't have any instructions to follow. Time always seems to be a factor, as the sooner they move, the sooner they avoid Big Mom, Charlotte Linlin herself. He doesn't want to meet her just yet, especially with their fighting power only being 3. You bastard. Do you think brother will entertain your demands? He wouldn't even show up for the likes of me. I'm not a high-ranking member of the Big Mom Pirates. Exclaimed Burleigh. Although Luffy knew better, he knew full well of their sibling dynamic. Try me. Was his only reply, and the mirror user brought out her mirror. Just then Mihawk joined the group. Sorry I took so long, I was fighting my copy and actually enjoyed fighting with myself. To that Burleigh gave a shocked look. Her mirror clone were exact replicas of the one who had copies, but the weakness was, it was only a copy and not the real deal. But this Mihawk guy was strong enough to beat his own mirror copy within minutes. They were a lot stronger than they were letting off. She has to comply with them until someone else catches on. Hopefully someone will come to her rescue. Burleigh tool grasp of her mirror, which grew in size, now showing a doorway. This allowed passage for the group to enter the mirror world. Luffy entered first, knowing his way through the world. Burleigh took note of this, but was nudged by Arlong to follow, where Mihawk brought up the rear. Whoa, what a trip. Stated Arlong as he looked around him. Reflective surfaces were everywhere. It was like a weird dream, but kin to better. This is beautiful. He exclaimed, to which Burleigh uncharacteristically blushed. Really? She stated bashfully, no one has ever complimented her mirror world before. Yeah, this is amazing. Did you do this? Arlong asked as he continued to look in awe at the structure. Well yeah, it is my ability. Suddenly the two began to converse, more animated than usual. Burleigh forgot that she was captive, while Arlong forgot that he was the captor. Luffy looked at Mihawk, who shrugged his shoulder. Who knows, maybe there was something there. Luffy then cleared his throat, causing the duo to stop, and they straightened themselves. Well? He asked, which case Burleigh finally understood. Right, they wanted her brother, but why? Okay already. She then brought out a small hand mirror where she called for Katakuri. At first nothing, then a few more seconds passed. Finally it was silent. No answer on the other end. There goes that plan. Said Arlong, but just as Luffy was going to call it a day, a spear was thrusted right past Luffy's head. Luckily Mihawk blocked it with Yoru before it could connect with his skull. Arlong found himself on the ground, and an invisible force, much faster than his eyes, literally swept him off his feet. Burleigh then found herself in the arms of her dearest brother, who came to save her. Brother. She exclaimed, surprised that he came. Who was he? The man was the strongest of them all, a man who could challenge for a seat of a Yonko if it weren't for his mother. This man was Luffy's strongest recruit. This man was Charlotte Katakuri. His eyes were burning holes through all the intruders within the mirror world, his signature scarf draped around his neck to cover his monstrous mouth, to which Luffy didn't even care about the appearance. But apparently, the Charlotte family made a big deal about it. For a bunch of people who were mixed in race, they sure are picky with appearances. Who the fuck are you? Asked Katakuri as he gently moved his sister behind him. Monkey D. Luffy, future pirate king. I request your assistance. Luffy began, but of course, Katakuri merely looked at him with confusion. What the? Who the hell do you think you are, barging into mama's land, kidnapping my sister, and then calling me out? Is this some kind of stupid joke? Katakuri exclaimed, not believing the situation before him. Right, well I know your mother really well, and I don't think your beliefs line up with hers. I believe that if you were given an opportunity to find your own path, you'll jump at the chance. You are a man simply out of place in your own family. Luffy was hitting all his major talking points, but he had a feeling it was probably not enough. He was an intruder after all. Shut it, intruder, you act as if you know me. He then twirled his trident, placing it behind him. I will silence you myself. Though Luffy had a smile on his face because deep down, he knew he rattled Katakuri's resolve. Reinforcement are on their way, brother. Exclaimed Broly, who opened a doorway to let some allies through. She sneakily opened a doorway as she hid behind her elder brother. Katakuri took this opportunity to engage Luffy in battle, understanding that he was the most powerful of the intruding group. Like hell. Exclaimed Arlong as he busted the mirror entrance with his fist. His effort shot down the flood of Big Mom Pirates chess soldiers from arriving, but what he did not anticipate was another one of the sweet commanders to join the battle. Oh shit, Arlong knew he wasn't a match for the person last to get through the mirror. His power could match even that of Jin. Broly prepared to open another doorway on the opposite end of the mirror world. But before she could continue, Mihawk appeared from behind her. Katakuri, who was still engaged in a battle with Luffy, attempted to rescue his sister, but Luffy would not let Katakuri attempt to assist anyone else. This was their battle. So Mihawk chopped Broly's neck, effectively knocking her out. Her mirror ability will not be a problem for the time being. His gaze then shifted to a couple of yards away, for in the middle of an army of pawn soldiers was Arlong engaged in a battle with a stronger person. Good. Meanwhile, the aforementioned third recruit of the Straw Hat Grand Armada was currently struggling with a numbers game. The chess soldiers were formidable in that they kept coming back for more beating. That wouldn't really be a big issue, except he was also keeping said soldiers from interfering in his captain's fight. Finally, to make matters worse, the last person to enter through the portal was a sweet commander. Your name pirate, for you will be killed today by me, Charlotte Snack. The last man to enter the portal was a similar rank in the Big Mom Pirates hierarchy. His name was Charlotte Snack, and he was a big man with a giant blade on his back. Fuck you is my name. Exclaimed Arlong as he felt his ally take some heat from him. From across the room, Mihawk traveled the distance within seconds, clashing blades with Charlotte Snack. I am Dracula Mihawk and I will be your opponent. Proclaimed the swordsman. Black Blade Yoru sparked under the deadly gaze of Snack as his own blade challenged the supremacy of Mihawk. Very well then. Thus the battle of the mirror world was underway. Charlotte Broly was knocked out, no way of getting more people in the mirror world while she was passed out. Arlong fought all the chess soldiers in order to keep them away from Mihawk and Luffy's individual battles. He was thinking in his mind that this was way funner than sulking around in Fishman Island. Dracula Mihawk was in a heated battle with Charlotte Snack as neither man will accept a loss. And lastly, Monkey D. Luffy was engaged in a fist fight with Charlotte Katakuri in hopes of swaying the man enough to leave with them. After all, they came all this way for his services. Meanwhile, in Whole Cake Island. Captain. There is some trouble in the seducing woods. Exclaimed a high-ranking chess soldier. What is it, my sweet? Asked a gigantic woman, although her tone was calm, something about her seemed menacing. Your daughter Broly, your son Katakuri and Snack have all disappeared. An intruder with a straw hat has come for your land and seemed to have caused the disappearance. The chess soldier could not get any more word in as a blade pierced right through its stomach. The menacing woman began to have a frantic look in her eyes. Red-haired is here for my head. Exclaimed the woman, although another person picked up on the update. Well, more like a bird person. It seemed like they were used to the questionable decision-making of the woman. No, Big Mom, it is another man, a man who was relatively unknown until he made his name known for defeating Borsalino of the Marines. They call him Mugiwara, a birdman hybrid entered from the shadow. His feathered hands were grasped firmly together as this was a fantastic opportunity. He only came for his weekly bribe to alter the news story from Big Mom, but this was amazing. Someone was in her land. This was going to be quite a story. For a very long time Big Mom remained quiet, unchallenged, and kept within her lands. This was amazing, indeed. Morgan. If you weren't an asset I would kill you right now. Exclaimed the angry Big Mom. I was having an amazing morning with such delicious food, but this Mugiwara ruined everything. She then raised her hand summoning her thundercloud, Zeus, and her own personal son, Prometheus. Then the same blade that stabbed one of her own men turned into a bicorn, it was known as Napoleon, gently placing itself on her head. I'll end this Mugiwara today for ruining my morning. Someone find me a way into Broly's world now. She exclaimed, to which the foot soldier began to scramble. Big Mom, you forget that Broly keeps mirrors all over her woods. One of them should eventually allow you passage. For an ally of Big Mom, the bird knew a lot about her family. Her eyebrows were raised and she looked at Morgan, although it was an issue for another time. Very well, Zeus, bring me to the seducing woods. Big Mom took a firm grasp of Prometheus. Aye mama. Exclaimed Zeus enthusiastically, and the cloud grew in size and Big Mom stood on top of him. Then the thundercloud zoomed through the room and onto the seducing woods, leaving Big News Morgan to himself. Note to self. Morgan brought out a voice recorder. Big Mom challenged by the mysterious Mugiwara, he then turned off the voice recorder, gently placing it within his jacket. His eyes glowed in glee at this surprising change in dynamic. He then opened his arms, and with one downward flap of his wings, he was off, time to return to headquarters to report on the news. Back in the mirror world. You're stronger than you first let off. Katakuri remained standing, but he was panting heavily from the head-on battle with the Straw Hat captain. Luffy had learned from this man in his previous lifetime, he knew his moves and his abilities. Advantage was on his side. So there they were, standing at a standstill, with Luffy, barely grazed and Katakuri, bleeding slightly on the top of his head. Luffy patted himself in the back for landing a successful jet stamp when Katakuri thought he had an advantage. I guess so, I'm gonna let you in on a little secret. You haven't seen nothing yet. Luffy proclaimed as it was true. Luffy had only used gear seconds so far, combined with his mastery in armament and observation haki. Thanks to Katakuri and his previous life, his observation haki was top-notched, and thanks to Old Man Hyogoro, his hardening is at its advanced state. You say you can carve a new path in this era Mugiwara? Katakuri asked as he wiped the blood from his face, his mind finally digesting the offer of the pirate before him. Not only will I carve a new path, but I will create a new era of peace and harmony throughout the world. Why would I even leave a new world emperor? Yes, Luffy finally got through him. Are you happy? Do you like being a minister of whatever you are a minister of? Tell me Katakuri, when was the last time your mother brought down her anger on your siblings? Who was the last one to face her wrath? I need your help if I were to change this world. So if you don't want to come with me, fine, but you need to ask yourself if you are happy. So Katakuri, do you want to be free? Do you want to join us in the open sea? Exclaimed Luffy, giving the third son of Big Mom a thumbs up. His smirk reflected his shiny white teeth creating a gleaming illusion. This fight was not serious for him, it was like a test to sway Katakuri to his cause. But the beating he was receiving from this Straw Hat fellow, memories of his childhood went through his mind. He was really considering the offer now. A new path he could create on his own, one where he was not bonded by his mother's crazy will. Yes, that would be great. He closed his eyes for a moment, removing his scarf out of his face. There his hideous mouth was revealed, his most guarded secret shown to his enemies. Though instead of the traumatic shouts of disgust and mocking, Luffy simply smiled at him. Well, shall we continue? Luffy raised both hands, ready for more. His senses were going crazy, there was something approaching, something quick. You really won't stop, won't you? Katakuri retracted his weapon, finally understanding what he needed to do. If he were to stay isolated in Totland, he would never realize his true potential. And this man was offering him a way out. He knew he could be more than he is now. He seemed to know a lot of things. I want to be free, so I will go with you, but on one condition, Broly is coming with us. Done deal. Luffy said with a smile as something big was definitely coming now. In the far corner of the mirror world, something menacing entered the world. It was someone Luffy does not want to challenge at this point of time. Charlotte Linlin has entered the mirror world. We have to go now. Seems like a lot of things go Luffy's way as Mihawk held snack at sword point, with the sweet commander losing his blade. This was the ultimate loss for the Big Mom pirate. Arlong had taken care of the chess soldiers and had run to wake Broly. In the short moment that they met each other, something sparked. Aye, Captain. Arlong picked up Broly bridal style. Hey Broly, we really need your help right now. He attempted to wake her up as he ran in the opposite direction that Big Mom was zooming towards them. Luffy and Katakuri began to run as well, with the new ally looking like he really did jump ship. In Luffy's mind this was good, he really thought that it would be harder than this. Well, it could get worse if Big Mom catches them. Mihawk swiftly took the dull side of his blade and smacked Snack along the side of his face, joining the group in their escape. Mother. Katakuri fell back to express his wish to Big Mom. The gigantic woman stopped in her track, as no one in her family can pique her interest like Katakuri can. I will be leaving today and join the Straw Hat Pirates. I wish for you to grant me my freedom. Luffy gripped his fist tightly, this could be a problem if Katakuri hadn't stopped, they would have been caught by the raging hormonal monster. Mihawk gripped his sword tightly, Snack was nothing compared to Big Mom. For Mihawk, he only truly felt this power with Whitebeard who exerted his will throughout Fishman Island, but that time he was outside Ryugu Palace when Luffy took a Bacento ride on his forearm. But this was insane. Her power up close was so much that even Mihawk gripped his sword tightly, as this fear. Luckily, as all things seemed to go for Luffy so far in his time travel journey, Arlong managed to wake up Broly whispering to her their predicament. No one can leave my family without giving up something precious. What will it be, my son? To hold her off this long with just talking, Luffy was glad Katakuri had that sort of pull with Big Mom. If she was ranging, they would have all been on the ground from horrible injuries, or worst, dead. I will surrender my life here. Katakuri opened up his arms, ready for his soul to be taken from him. Very well, boy. Big Mom's right hand attempting to take years off of Katakuri's soul. But before she could reach him, an outstretched elastic arm grabbed Katakuri and pulled him back. Big Mom yelled in anger as her strike missed. "Let's go!" exclaimed Luffy as Broly managed to return to her senses and opened a doorway out of the mirror world. Mihawk, Arlong along with Broly in his arms, Luffy and now Katakuri, managed to jump out of the entranceway. "Close it," he exclaimed, to which Broly did. "Brother, are we free?" asked Broly groggily. Arlong looked down at the woman in his arms. What have they gone through under Big Mom's rule? "Yes. We are Mugiwara, thank you for saving me. She was going to take 100 years. Don't sweat it, you're part of my crew now," Luffy replied as the group began to sigh in relief. But their problems would not end there. A large group of the Big Mom pirates were on their way to them. "Follow me, crew." He immediately shot up running towards a cliff. Arlong and Broly shared a look, confused at what was happening. Instead of stopping, Luffy jumped off the cliff deep. Below the cliff could only be seawater. Right. Katakuri and Mihawk followed Luffy down the cliff without hesitation. Were they scared of the Big Mom pirates' forces that they would rather die? Arlong and Broly looked at one another again. "I won't let you die." He was a fishman, he could swim her to safety, he just wasn't sure about Machi Boy and the captain. "Okay." And then Arlong jump. So deep below the cliff could only be seawater. Wrong. For the Straw Hat Grand Armada members landed on a deck of the ship. Luffy, Mihawk and Katakuri landed on their feet while Arlong elected to be Broly's cushion. She landed on top of him, softening her landing. Arlong was on his back seeing stars, then his vision cleared and he could see an arrow pointed in his face. He looked around and found a bunch of women pointing their bow and arrow at the group. Then flying high in the sky, the flag which is feared throughout the sea, a skull surrounded by 8 snakes. "Tell me what you know." Firmly in the grasp of a beautiful raven-haired woman, possibly the most beautiful he had ever seen, was a letter crumpled up in her hands addressed to one Bo Hancock. Everyone now looked at Luffy in confusion. Chapter 3. Luffy had pulled out a piece of paper and was scribbling a letter. The letter consists of his request, his way out of Whole Cake Island, and a strong addition to his crew. Although he was not sure if the person who was receiving it would take him seriously. Maybe they would think it was a prank. Whatever, if push comes to shove then he would just have to push his way through Big Mom and her many children, hopefully with the assistance of his initial choice for a first recruit. Mihawk had called for a messenger bird along with Luffy. Each one of them handed the bird a letter, one for different locations. Mihawk sent out a letter for his answer to the government's invitation, while Luffy sent out a letter to his hopefully future ally. The thing is, the letter contained a request for assistance to one, Bo Hancock. Within the letter he provided the location of their meeting point and the date. Within the letter simply contained back tattoo, which spurned the anger of the pirate empress. She received the letter and exclaimed in anger almost immediately. "Set sail to coordinates within this wretched letter. Immediately." And there they were, the Kuja pirates at the border of Tata Land, housing the Straw Hat Grand Armada members who were fleeing from Big Mom pirates as they recruited Katakuri and Broly. The Kuja pirates began to head away from Tata Land before the Big Mom pirate could pursue them. "Success!" exclaimed Luffy with his fist up in the air. But Hancock was not smiling, neither were her sisters, along with the hundreds of Kuja pirates, with their bow pointed at them. Oh. The Kuja pirates caught a good breeze, pushing them past the pursuing Big Mom pirates. In due time, they would leave them in the dust. "You." Her gaze was deadly, but to the eyes of others, it was seductive. "Come with me." She expressed her anger, yet Luffy was not worried. Everyone on the deck was at edge, the Amazon warriors were ready to fire at their empress's command. Meanwhile the members of the Straw Hat Grand Armada were ready for a fight. "It's alright guys, me and the pirate empress have business to attend to. Just don't engage." Bo Hancock continued to look down on Luffy as she pointed her finger at him, her head was thrown all the way back as this was her way of looking down on someone. It was very cute really, too bad he never noticed her before. "Mugiwara, follow me." She then summoned her trusty python, who carried her to a private captain quarters aboard the Kuja pirate ship. Luffy shrugged his shoulder and followed her, looking at Katakuri, his eyes saying for them to stand down. The newest addition to the pirate group raised his hands, to which his crew member relaxed. Little by little, the hierarchy was starting to form within the Straw Hat Grand Armada. Mihawk released his grip on his blade, Arlong put his fist down, while ensuring that Broly was shielded right behind him. Katakuri looked at the two and made a mental note of whatever the hell was going on there. Though the Straw Hats lowered their weapons, the Kuja pirates continued to threaten them with their bow. Going to the captain's quarter was the easy part as Hancock continued to stare him down. She then opened the door and had him go in first. Luffy complied again, in his mind he was getting his story straight. She then slammed the door behind her, memories of her previous life flashed before her eyes as the shameful tattoo was brought up by this damn pirate. Their eyes met as Luffy found himself mesmerized in her eyes, burning with loathsome feeling against men. And then a vision passed through him, in a similar way that Queen Atoham gave him a vision into her life by a handshake, Hancock gave him a vision via eye contact. He stood before her as her celestial dragon whipped her repeatedly for attempting to get a piece of bread. Her young frail body could barely bear the beating. Though she did not cry, he could feel her resolve as she wanted to reserve her fluids, crying would waste what little water she had in her body. Then as the beating finally ended and the celestial dragons finally left her alone, Hancock lay on the ground for a moment before finally spitting the piece bread in which she took a beating for. She then placed it in one of her tiny pockets as she slowly made her way back to the sleeping quarter. Luffy followed her and threw her slow limp towards where she needed to go. He could feel what she was feeling. It was anger, confusion, disbelief, sorrow, but she was not one without hope that she clinged onto. Then as she reached where she sleeps when the celestial dragons weren't having their fun with her, she took out the small piece of bread and split it in three. What little piece she stole and took a beating for, she split for underneath the hay in which she slept on were two other girls. Luffy could recognize them as Sandersonia with the green hair and Marigold with the golden locks. "What happened to you?" asked Marigold, tears began to well from her eyes. "Please don't cry, reserve your strength, eat." Hancock shakily handed them a piece of her bread, what little she had taken what her body suffered for. "No, Hancock, you eat it," replied Sandersonia, trying to give her back the piece of bread. "Please, you both have to eat." The rave-haired girl pushed the bread back in Sandersonia's mouth, to which she finally ate it. What little was given to her was greatly appreciated. "We will survive, I swear it." "Slaves. Time for a show." Someone screamed from a distance. People who were living no better than livestock began to flock out, as they were the property of the celestial dragon, and the show was the process in which the celestial dragon picks a slave and does whatever the hell they want to do, whatever it was. Marigold and Sandersonia trembled at the thought of what their day would look like. But Hancock held them close, hugging them both. "We will all get through this," she stated firmly, though her body trembled from her weakness. It did not help that her body continued to flare up from eating a devil fruit for the pleasure of the celestial dragons. They did whatever they wanted, and they force-fed the sisters one devil fruit each, making them show animals. That's how they were treated. As the sister made their way to the pit where the show takes place, Luffy could see a hideous-looking celestial dragon, a product of many years of inter-family procreation. The celestial dragon made his way to Hancock, taking an interest in her. He then caressed her cheeks before smacking her on the side of her head. Why? No reason. They didn't need a reason to. The slaves were property of the celestial dragon. He then dragged her to a red room, decorated with the finest that the world could offer. This was where the celestial dragons had their way with whoever they wanted. He proceeded to toss her in bed and then slowly caressed her beautiful skin. "Stupid slave," he whispered before ripping her clothes from her body. Hancock did not flinch, as this was something that occurred often. She did not give them the satisfaction of showing fear. Luffy could only look on as Hancock was going to be raped, her body was going to be used without consent. His fist was clenched tightly and his face turned bright pink, as all he wanted to do was beat the life out of the celestial dragon. Boom. Something miraculous happened. An explosion occurred in the distance, causing the celestial dragon to momentarily jump away from Hancock. "Revolution!" exclaimed someone from the outside. The celestial dragon opened the door to have a look and found the pit on fire. "What the hell is going on?" exclaimed the celestial dragon. Hancock laid in bed, not daring to move so that she did not get disciplined. No need to elaborate on what they do to those who do not obey. "Sir, for your safety, please come with me, we are under attack." This caused Hancock to sit up. Under attack. The celestial dragon followed the guard, suddenly screaming in panic. Hancock grabbed the cloth from the bed, wrapping her naked body. She slowly made her way outside the red room where she found flames everywhere. Then suddenly from the roof of the red room, a guard of the celestial dragon fell and on his chest was a dagger. He had been stabbed by a tall, powerful fishman. "Run now," exclaimed the fishman. He then ran to another guard who was electrocuting a slave on the ground. The fishman tackled the guard and threw him against the wall. Hancock still couldn't understand what was going on, really, but she ran, found her sisters, and they all ran. Luffy could only watch in horror at everything that was going on. This was the day that Fisher Tiger climbed up the red line and released the slaves held by the celestial dragons. Though he did not do everything himself, he could see his familiar face assisting Fisher Tiger. It was his father, Monkey D. Dragon. Along with other members of the Revolutionary Army, the group managed to help the slaves escape that day. Then the vision ended and Luffy was back in the room with Hancock. "What do you know of my back tattoo, Mugiwara?" Hancock exclaimed as no time seemed to pass from the vision and the present time. After seeing her vision, he understood her disdain, her disbelief and her anger. Luffy could finally see Hancock as more than just the pirate empress. She was a human tormented by oppressors in the past, burdened by her position as the strongest woman in her country. "I know that you are a strong person for what you went through." He stood up then took one step forward, causing Hancock to flinch slightly. There was a good distance between them, but Luffy was trying to calm her suspicions. Those who wronged you are not human, they are worse than trash, and I swear on everything that I will deal with them for what they did too. Prevent it from ever happening again. Then Luffy took another step. And another. You don't know me. Why do you act as if you know what I went through? You are merely a stupid man, all of you are scums in the face of this earth. Hancock prepared her ability as if the Straw Hat person gets any closer, she will turn him into stone. You ask what I know about your back tattoo, I know it's a mark of the celestial dragons. Another step, and now he was only a few steps from getting close to her. How her heart dropped at the mention of those demonic beings. Listen, it does not make you less of a human being for what they did to you, in fact it makes you better than them. Those monsters will eventually get what they deserve, and I will be the man to make sure of it. Luffy was finally face to face with her. Luffy stood about a head above her, both were now the same age. In his past life she had been taller than him, but her smaller 19-year-old body made Luffy the taller of the duo. Hancock took her hands and formed a heart, slightly shocked at his closeness. Sorry, but she released her Miro Miro ability, her heart-shaped energy waves escaped her hands and phased through Luffy. She expected him to turn to stone as all men only want one thing, they were lustful creatures, and her ability petrifies those who lust for her, and with her beautiful features, amazing body, and powerful aura, nobody could resist her. But he did, Luffy remained unfazed, not becoming petrified. She then upped her game by removing her top, the silky dress fell smoothly from her body, revealing her ample breast, and left little for imagination, and again she attempted to turn him to stone and again nothing. All she could see from his eyes was desire, there was desire, but not the desire she needed from him. For his desire was to comfort her pain. Why is he like this? Not like any other men she met in her life. He then did something completely unexpected, he picked her up clothes from the ground and slid it back along her body, then he held her shoulders. He froze but he didn't try anything, not a kiss, not for pleasure, no, all he did was pull her in and hugged her. Yes, all he did was hug her, pulling her close to him. His arms were forceful but gentle, his grip was tight but relaxing, allowing him to comfort her pain. The pirate empress Boa Hancock has not cried since the first day of becoming a human slave for the celestial dragon. She never cried since then, it was a sign of weakness. And she was not going to show them her weakness. But here she was, held in the arms of a strange man who promised to right the wrong of this world, and suddenly she couldn't help but break down. All the years that she had to stay strong, to become the pinnacle of the strength in her country, to become a Shichibukai in order to protect her people, and to destroy any men who attempted to touch her land, all. Her pent-up emotion was finally released as tears began to flow from her eyes. It had been years and letting the tears escape her eyes felt right, it gave her relief, it felt so good. Luffy held her close, his strong presence allowed her to show a moment of weakness. How did he know her so well? It was like they have known each other for years. Did he have this sort of effect on people? He did bait her to pick him up from certain doom from the Big Mom pirates, he also did not turn into stone from her ability. She had to know more about this man who was going to change the world, she knew it and she wanted to be there with him. Her tears finally ended after a couple of minutes. She then took in his scent for the last time before gently pushing away from his embrace. You feel better? Luffy asked, his look of concern was mesmerizing, another man saw her at her most vulnerable, and yet he treated her like another human being, with feelings, with emotions, with understanding. Maybe there was hope for the men in this world after all. Yeah, thank you. Why do you make me feel this way despite this being the first time we met each other? Hancock asked, her heart was beating, and her eyes were dilated. Luffy noticed this and took a big gulp. In any timeline it seems that Hancock will fall in love with him, just for being himself. I noticed that you were carrying a burden, and I thought I'd help you ease up a little bit. Anyways, thank you for getting us from Todo Land, where are we headed now? He took a seat on the bed, whereas Hancock continued to remain standing, her back against the door. Luffy could tell that her breathing became heavy, as if a primal instinct was taking over her. They just met, but he could tell she was excited for him. She approached him slowly, with each step a swing of her bodacious assets. This was supposed to be just a talk, but he had a way with how he treated her that she wanted him right there and then. Pirate Empress. Luffy gulped now that she was using her assets, he was starting to see her as more than the Pirate Empress, now he was seeing her as a woman. She got close and pushed him on his back, her emotional outburst and his assistance in calming her made her this way. Though before anything else could happen, the door burst open revealing Sandersonia and Marigold. Sister, what has this man done to you? Exclaimed Sandersonia as she morphed into her hybrid form. Although it didn't seem like Luffy was the one subduing Hancock, in fact, Luffy was on the bed with Hancock seemingly prowling on top of him. Ahem. Hancock stood up straight, clearing her throat. She poised herself with her legs noticeably shaking. Was it from excitement? Was it for anticipation? Luffy would find out another time. But for now there was his current predicament. Well, we have negotiated their surrender and we will take them all to Amazon Lily for interrogations. Take them to the cell. Sandersonia and Marigold looked at each other but complied. Luffy understood her position, she had to continue to look strong to her people or else they would not recognize her. So he was brought to the brig of the ship where the rest of his crew was. They all sat on their individual cells as they followed their captain's instruction. Do not fight back. He was then put into his own cell and locked in. The Amazon women finally left the brig, leaving the Strawats to themselves. All the members of the pirate crew were wearing sea prism cuffs. Captain, these cells are frail, these cuffs do not bind me, I can rip it with my hands. Arlong was only telling the truth, maybe the Amazon women were so confident in their ability that they did not secure the cells. Nah, we're okay, she's bringing us to Amazon Lily. That's where we need to go. Luffy simply sat on his cell, placing his straw hat over his eyes. It was time for a nap. How come, Captain? Burly asked. She just joined the crew along with her brother, but she felt that Luffy was the leader Big Mom could never be. Before drifting into sleep, Luffy had a simple answer. Sabaody. And then he fell asleep, a giant snot bubble forming from his nose. Why Sabaody? Asked Katakuri, that place seems so pointless, but it's a bustling archipelago full of rookies. We were there a couple of days ago. He said something about meeting a friend. Mihawk had traveled the world in search of a worthy opponent and it was there, only a few days ago, did he lose a fight against a marine admiral and it wasn't even a fight. Maybe a rematch with those stupid celestial dragons? Asked Arlong, scratching his chin. The whole time they were conversing, Katakuri was just content in listening to them converse. For the day had been a long one. He just left a Yonko in the most prominent position in Big Mom's crew and has now joined a new pirate crew led by a very powerful yet mysterious captain. This was going to be an adventure indeed. Newspaper. Throughout the world, a newsletter went out from the one and only Big News Morgan. In this letter, it contained a handful of new wanted posters and only one story, the most important of them all. Marineford Marine HQ. God damn it, who is this punk? Exclaimed recently Admiral Sakazuki, also known as Akainu. He slammed his fist against the table, breaking it in half. His anger was well documented, but nobody has riled him up like this. Mugiwara Monkey D. Luffy, son of the revolutionary responsible for the Holy Land outbreak, Monkey D. Dragon. Also the grandson of marine hero, Monkey D. Garp. Explained Kuzan, who sat beside Kizaru. They were recently assigned under the tutelage of the Marine Admiral. They were both being groomed to become the next admirals, with Kuzan being a front runner. To his comment, Akainu simply looked at him with disdain. Of course he knew who he was, he just wanted to scream something. This kid was a head case everywhere. Kuzan and Kizaru simply sat in their chairs as their newest commanding officer was thrown into a fit of rage. Admiral Sengoku had recently announced that one of them will become the next admiral to assume his position, but it was up to Admiral Akainu to decide. Newspaper. The first poster was that of Charlotte Burleigh, she was looking up at someone, a picture which captures her love-struck look. Possibly taken when Arlong was carrying her through the whole Todo Land fiasco. Her face was slightly pink, but her eyes glowed in glee. Underneath her name was her bounty, dead or alive, 60 million beery. Cliffside Todo Land. Mugiwara. Exclaimed Charlotte Linlin as the Strawats and the Kuja pirates were able to escape her wrath. She was the most powerful woman in the whole world and he was outwitted by a damn Strawat brat. Plus Katakuri and Burleigh were now gone, joining the bastard. Mama, we don't need them, Katakuri was always weak and Burleigh was even weaker, we are still one of the most powerful crew in the new world. Perospero was the first son of Charlotte Linlin and he had been taking a back seat from Katakuri. He would never beat him in a fair fight, even with the help of others, they would still lose. But Perospero does not fight fair. Big Mom pirates won't remain so dormant for long. From the depths of the underground and the protective narrative of Big News Morgan, they will emerge out of their stasis and become one of the most powerful players in the new world. The Big Mom pirates, due to the activity of Strawat Luffy, is going to become more brutal with Perospero at the helm of the Sweet Commanders than with the leadership of Katakuri. With Katakuri in the previous timeline, the Big Mom was more logical and Charlotte Linlin was more manageable with Katakuri's massive influence. But now with the void that he created for going with the Strawat pirates, Perospero does not care if Big Mom was controlled, he only cares for destruction, chaos, and that's what will happen from here on out. Ah! Yelled Big Mom in frustration. Her mighty roar ripped the cloud out of formation. And through sheer display of power. Her children, allies, and whoever was present on the hill that day realized that Big Mom had been kept dormant by Katakuri and now she will be unleashed. To those who witnessed her anger and to those who heard her mighty roar from miles away, they all knew the time had come. The Big Mom pirates are mobilizing. Newspaper. The next poster would be the man holding Bruley. His wanted poster would be captured to where his upper body was shown and only some parts of Bruley can be seen. Her nose was the most prominent in the picture, but his long, sharp nose was also quite distracting. Arlong the Saw, and underneath his name, dead or alive. 100 million Beery. Alabasta Kingdom. This will be your new sleeping quarters. The man with the golden hook for a hand led the raven-haired girl. She remained quiet, not uttering a word since the man had saved her from the alley. Did he really value her ability to read poneglyphs? Isn't it supposed to be illegal? Not a talker, are you? He then went to the door, with a raven-haired girl sitting on the bed. If you need anything, my name is Crocodile. Before he left, he gave her a smile. Robin. Was her reply, to which Crocodile's smile grew even wider. He then closed the door and left her to herself. All she could do was lay in her bed, the fresh aroma of clean sheets and a clean room was mesmerizing. She hasn't had this. She had her mother back in O'Hara. Newspaper. Then there was a poster of a man. His bounty would have been frozen if he would have simply joined the Warlord program. His wanted poster was a look into his face. His deadly gaze, perfectly trimmed beard, was captured perfectly by the photographer. Dracula Mihawk, dead or alive, 300 million Beery. Fishman Island, Ryugu Kingdom. Whitebeard, I advise you to consider it. Shanks sat across from Whitebeard, aboard the famed Moby Dick. The Whitebeard pirates were on the move, starting their quest for Laugh Tale. This is my family, red-haired. I will not abandon my family. He slammed his Bacento on the deck of the ship, causing tremors to erupt from around them. Shanks didn't want to anger the old man further, as a seaquake could be problematic. Fine, I get it. But I've warned you. He then began to walk away. As he too has an important business to attend to. Shanks eventually walked towards his own ship, leaving the Whitebeard pirates. What did he want, Pop? Descending majestically on the deck from the eagle's nest. His wing burned a bright blue and yellow color, transforming into a phoenix. He then reverted to his human form as he descended beside his captain. Marco the Phoenix, 1st Division commander of the Whitebeard pirates. He told me to watch out for Teach. He said that he was in trouble. Began Whitebeard. But I don't abandon family. He has been with us since he was an orphan child. It sounded more like he was convincing himself. Suddenly a head popped up from the deck of the ship. His body was covered in red liquid. The mood suddenly became darker. And behind the man was Teach, with a massive smile on his face. Whitebeard's heart dropped. That's what? Yo Captain, me and Teach were just cooking some mean pasta. It blew up on my face. Thatch then grabbed Teach and messed with his hair. This is a good lad here helping me clean it up. Too bad I didn't clean myself up. Oh. Marco sighed in relief. He also thought for the worst. Deep down inside, he knew that kid wasn't right. And so did Whitebeard. Teach had heard their initial conversation. He was sharper than he let off. Outside he was laughing with Thatch, but deep down inside he screamed as his plan was almost ruined by red-haired. He knew he should have done more than scar the scum bastard. But for now they had more pressing matters to attend to. Whitebeard was going to be king. Newspaper. The second to the last bounty revealed the former member of the Big Mom Pirates. Charlotte Katakuri's photograph revealed his face without his scarf. Back in his homeland, his family openly mocked the wanted poster. But here he was, with a smile, happy in his own skin. Underneath his name, alive, 600 million Beery. For Big Mom wanted to be the one who ended Katakuri's life. Somewhere in the Grand Line. Log 318. Mission report, target. Mujiwara. Preference. Dead. Status. Incomplete. Casualties. 48. Then the man put down his transponder snail and sat back down on the ship which he boarded. The flag which was raised high has been burned by the man. He then took out a small blade which he began to sharpen. Who are you? One man managed to survive the slaughter. This man weakly tried to get up but was unable to do so. The invader stood up, putting away his blade. He then took a deep sigh and then pulled the man to his feet. Shigan. The invader pierced the heart of the man, instantly killing him. His finger was covered in blood by he wiped it with the clothes of the man he just killed. Log 319. Mission report, target. Mujiwara. Preference. Dead. Status. Incomplete. Casualties. 49. He then sat down once more polishing his blade. Thank you so much. Exclaimed a woman aboard a rescue boat. You saved our lives. She yelled as the rescue boat was drifting away from the ship, though not just any ship, a slaver ship. He sighed once more. It wasn't like he found the slaver's ship, killed all the slave traders aboard the ship, freed all the people, and gave them a bag of gold to find their way back home. No, he wouldn't do that. He was Zephyr Pole's most effective assassin. Rob Lucci the assassin would never do something like that. Newspaper. The story which covered the entire newspaper for that day had the face of the newest face shooting up to the top of the pirate hierarchy. Morgan, reporter. Mujiwara. He is the man that single-handedly defeated a Marine Vice Admiral. He attacked a celestial dragon in Sabaody archipelago and escaped from a Marine Admiral. He is the man who single-handedly entered a Yonko's land and escaped alive. His crew is one of the most powerful ever assembled, consisting of Dracula Mihawk, Arlong the Saw, and recently defected Charlotte Burleigh, and more importantly, former commander of the Big Mom Pirates, Charlotte Katakuri. If you see him, fear him. For Mugiwara is a storm. Then his wanted poster was his angered look when he destroyed the Sabaody archipelago auction house. Then his name was simply Mugiwara, dead or alive. And his bounty. Red Force. Then. Are we there yet? Shanks was throwing a rubber ball against the wall of his office. He was bored out of his mind, maybe he should have gone with Luffy. No captain, not yet. But look at this. Ben tossed him the daily newspaper and closed the door from behind him. In the hands of Shanks was the newspaper. He went through the newsreel, the wanted poster of each and every member of the Straw Hats. Damn Luffy, what a crew. Then last was the Monkey D. Luffy. He's done so much already, and Shanks could clearly remember he just saw him 2 weeks ago. And the bounty 1 million beery, wait, that couldn't be right. The red-haired man looked over the bounty and scoffed at it being so low. But then he looked again, there was a fold on the bottom right of the paper. He opened it and his jaws dropped. More zeros were hiding from the fold of the paper. Monkey D. Luffy's first bounty in this new world was 1 billion beery. Guja pirate ship. Mugiwara. Hancock stood in front of Luffy's cell. A week has passed since the escape from Todo Land. The cell was annoying, but it sure beats fighting with Big Mom. Yes, Pirate Empress. Replied Luffy. Please call me Hancock, she said. Her voice was low, but the cells were close enough to where everyone can hear their conversation. Okay, then call me Luffy. And he extended his hands outside of the cell, to which Hancock took, and they shook hands. Her hands were soft and his hands were firm. There was an instant spark in the handshake, but they had to shake it off. She pulled away, holding her hand close to her heart. Luffy, we are approaching land. I'm sorry for putting you and your crew in a cage. I can't just change our laws overnight. It's fine, it's where we need to go anyway. He smiled at her, causing her heart to melt. They stared into each other's eye for a moment too long, but was broken out of trance by a loud voice. Land up ahead. Screamed someone from above. Well, goodbye for now, Luffy. She then began to walk away, but took a quick glance at him one more time, before finally going up to join her crew. Call me Arlong. Arlong began to mock Hancock's voice, whereas Burleigh joined along. Please call me Burleigh. And they both burst out laughing. Shut it, you two. But he had a stupid grin on his face. Katakuri and Mihawk were smiling at the exchange. Finally, they arrived, the land of women. Amazon Lily. Our empress has decided to engage you in a battle. Luffy's eyebrows were raised. Wait, 1 billion beery bounty. Huh, what the hell is going on? The battle will begin immediately in the arena. Make your way to the fighting pit. The people in the hall began to filter out, leaving the Straw Hats, the Gorgon sisters and Elder Nyan. Off to your trial then. The Straw Hats began to move out of the hall, but Elder Nyan held her staff in front of Luffy. Everyone but you. Arlong was going to start kicking ass, but Luffy held his hands up, telling everyone to go. Go on. Reluctantly, the Straw Hats left the hall, with 2 of the 3 Gorgon sisters leaving the room. Bang bang boys, lemon time, warning, R-rated content. And lemon will be found below if you want to skip the juice. The door closed from behind the group, leaving Luffy standing with his back turned and Hancock sitting on her throne. Luffy slowly turned around to Hancock, who got up from her throne. Follow me, our battle is this way. Hancock led the way, creating some distance in between them. The tension was euphoric, her body language was so inviting, yet she was keeping a distance in between them. Luffy aimlessly followed her, for an answer to what it is that she sought from him. While his crew was fighting for their survival, he was here with Hancock as she led him through a maze of the palace. She turned a corner and he followed her, but once he reached said corner, she was gone. Hancock. He called out, but no answer. He was a little confused but kept walking anyway. He could have used his observation hockey, but this way was more fun. The chase, the anticipation, it was intense. Then a rich aroma was in the distance as steam escaped a dimly lit room. Luffy followed the scent, and as he turned the corner, there she was appearing from out of nowhere. Initially he was too shocked to react as her lips connected with his. Then instant spark as their lips moved naturally, in thirst for one another. Luffy had never engaged in any sexual activity before, even something as simple as kissing. But this felt right, this felt good. He then took the lead, understanding what she desired. She yelped slightly as he used his hands to pull her closer, intensifying the exchange. At first she was surprised to be overpowered, but she melted in his arms as the kiss intensified. They broke their kiss for a moment and stared intently in each other's eyes. "Hi you," he said, to which she smiled. "Hi," she replied with a blush on her face. She then boldly pulled him towards her bed. It was humongous and yet she slept on it all by herself. Now she finally found a man who can complete her, not that she needed him, she wanted him. She laid on her back and began to position herself higher and higher in the bed. This whole time, Luffy had been chazzing her lips, hungry for her touch. He followed her up the bed until they were finally settled in the middle of the bed. Luffy pulled himself back a little, admiring the woman in front of him. Her fair skin was so mesmerizing, her body was a wonder in this world, and yet he hadn't had an opportunity to remove her clothing. Is this my test? Our battle? He whispered, remembering the test mentioned earlier. Yes. Was her short response, her breath had caught a little in anticipation. Please don't turn me into stone because I'll lose. Luffy whispered in her ears as he began to go down her neck and kissed her. Then from her neck to her chest, his body was leading him to do things he didn't know he could do. It was right, his body wanted this so badly, and he knew she did as well. His hands removed the cloth which covered her breast, freeing them from their encasement. He then ran his hands from her shoulder and slowly hovered around her right breast. He then began to caress them, causing a sensation all over her body. Her back arched slightly, allowing access for Luffy to pull her dress lower and lower until it was completely off her. She shivered at his gaze, she could see the care in his eyes, but she could finally see the burning lust which he had for her. It was not just the lust to care for her, but to have all of her. Luffy, I am no longer pure, it was taken from me when I was she began to which Luffy placed his lips against hers. You're to me. Was his response, and then his lips went from her lips and to her breast, sucking on them. A soft moan escaped her lips which made him excited. This whole time, his engorged member had been teasing her, poking her from his shorts at all times that it could. His mouth had its own mind, as from her breast, it went further down to her most precious area. Then his tongue moved along her spot, she couldn't handle it anymore as she let out a loud scream of pleasure. His mouth, it was doing things to her that she never experienced before. Before it was always so forceful and she numbed herself from the experience. But he was so gentle, and he followed what her body wanted. And then her body trembled as his tongue moved faster. Then her trembling stopped as she released her juices on his face. Her body limped as she finally came from only receiving oral. But this wasn't it, it was a battle, and she wasn't about to leave him without a fight. So she pushed herself up and forced Luffy on his back. It was her turn to take over. She began to kiss him, drowning him in her passion, while her hands worked her way through his pants. She removed them, and his member was now free from its own bondage. She knew what she was doing, she had to learn it to survive. But now it was different. She was doing it for a man that she wanted. It was mutual, not one-sided. Luffy felt her hands begin to move up and down on his member as she kissed him, and it felt amazing. But her next attack was something he did not expect as her lips quickly went from his mouth towards his member. And she was hungry. Hancock took all she could, swallow what she could, it was so big, bigger than anything she saw before. Regardless, she did bob her head repeatedly, up and down, encasing all she could with her mouth, her saliva covering dripping all over his member. Meanwhile Luffy, well Luffy was in heaven. Of course he never felt this before, he never had it done to him before. But it was amazing, words can't really describe it, the way she moved her mouth and the way it made him feel, he couldn't anymore he had to. Then white sticky liquid escaped him as Hancock had her throat deep. The sticky liquid continued to flow, even escaping her mouth as it was so much. And she took it all in, all of it. It was all hers. And as he finished, he too collapsed. She then smiled at herself in satisfaction and made her way to the restroom to wash herself. In Luffy's eyes it was tied, their intense battle, was only getting started. As she made her way back, Luffy was still hard. And he was ready for the main event. May I? He asked as she joined him in bed once again. You never have to ask me. Was her response and his member entered her causing her whole body to once again enter a range of pleasure. Every single part of her body was on fire and once he moved well it was game over. He had been on top of her and began to move his hips, her legs were spread wide receiving his member deep into her body. It was touching all of her pleasure points and she couldn't anymore. She came once more. But see, Luffy wasn't done with her as he turned her on all four and began to smash her from behind. Again and again each stroke brought great pleasure to both of them. Oh my god. Screamed Hancock as her body trembled in pleasure. I'm coming again Luffy, I'm going to. Luffy was trying to hold it in, but it felt so good, his member wrapped around her tight she came, he couldn't help it anymore as he pulled out last minute, stroking his member as a seemingly endless supply of sticky substance. But Hancock turned her body around, palming her own breast and massaging her clitoris to encourage Luffy to release more. And the sight of her touching herself did encourage him, as his liquid covered her. It was a sight to see, a sight indeed. Though that wasn't the end of their battle, it was only the beginning. Then lemon. For the rest of the day, while the Strawats had been fighting for their freedom, Luffy and Hancock had been engaged in their own battle. The first battle of that day had been between Arlong and Kikyo. The second battle of the day had been between Mihawk and Marigold. The final battle of the day had been between Katakuri and Sandersonia. All the while Luffy was doing his own battle with Hancock. The crowd was pumped up for the entire event and it transpired like so. Arlong the Saw vs Kikyo Kujo Elite Warrior. Arlong and Kikyo made their way to the center of the battle stadium. The Strawats were sitting along the viewer section with their hands bound with the two Gorgon sisters looking over the prisoners to ensure they did not escape. The main problem on the crew was currently with the Pirate Empress, so all they really have to worry about was Dogtooth and Hawkeye. Arlong stretched his arms then twisting his body to release tension on his back. Meanwhile Kikyo removed a strand of hair from her face, her trusty snake bow on her side, her other hand ready to pull an arrow on her back. The first battle will now commence, any outside interference will result in absolute defeat. Elder Nyan stood at the helm of the viewer box, raising both of her arms. Begin. It should have been a fight, should have lasted more than a few minutes. But Arlong took it upon himself to record a win within a few minutes. For within 5 minutes, Arlong had taken Kikyo's weapon without her knowledge. The first minute was a flurry of arrows that he dodged, he didn't want to be impaled by the poison-coated arrows. As she ran out of ammo, Arlong jumped in to close the gap. Then it was the second minute where Kikyo's hand-to-hand skill was noteworthy, but Arlong was trained in the art of Fishman karate. For each strike by Kikyo, Arlong countered by catching her punches before they could connect with him. But her punches were heavy and each one took a toll on him. But he wouldn't lose here, that would be slightly embarrassing to his new people. "DSK, you're strong," commented Kikyo as the third minute of their battle approaches. Kikyo attempted to use her snake bow to limit Arlong's movement. The snake reverted to its animal form and tried to constrict Arlong, but the fishman broke the binding. He then caught the incoming Kikyo before her feet could connect. He took a firm grip of her feet as she was in the air and threw her against the floor. The crowd was immediately silenced, for Kikyo was unable to move any longer. Then to seal the victory, Arlong picked up the snake bow. He raised it above his head to no applause, only the voice of Brulé could be heard cheering, but the rest were silent. Ahem. At the 5-minute mark of the first battle. Arlong wins. Elder Nyan stated dejected. With the victory, Arlong would no longer be in shackles, but will watch the battles as a spectator. Marigold slammed her mole axe on the ground and yelled. "What the hell? Get loud. For I, Bo Marigold, will be victorious in my battle." She raised her weapon in the air and the crowd erupted once more. Dracula Hawkeye Mihawk vs Bo Marigold. Mihawk stood up from his viewer's seat and was given his weapon. The Kuja women removed his cuffs and he finally made his way to the battle area. He swung his sword a couple of times to regain the blood flow in his arm. Meanwhile, Marigold continued to hype the crowd, but her effort would be for naught. As Elder Nyan announced the start of the battle, Mihawk disappeared from Marigold's peripheral. She panicked for a moment, instinctively bringing her mole axe to protect herself. But it was too late. Before she could even raise her weapon, Mihawk had already taken the mole axe off of her hand without allowing Marigold to move even an inch. The look of shock filled the crowd as their strongest warriors were defeated so easily by the outsiders. "The victor of this battle is Dracula Mihawk." Elder Nyan sounded dejected. But there was still hope. There was still Boa Sandersonia and Boa Hancock yet to go. But to save face, she thought of something that will prepare her fighter. A brief intermission will now commence for the final battle. The intermission will give Sandersonia some time to come up with a tactic in fighting Dogtooth. But even his tail reaches their isolated country. In 2 hours will be sundown, maybe the guise of darkness will give Sandersonia an advantage in the battle. Charlotte Dogtooth Katakuri vs Boa Sandersonia. The hour has passed and still no sign of Hancock or Mujiwara. Katakuri had been patiently sitting beside Brulé as they waited for his battle. Arlong and Mihawk were close by as they were no longer bound by shackles. Arlong sat on the floor beside the bench to where Brulé was sitting in. Mihawk stood beside Katakuri with his arms crossed and his blade hanging over his back. 5 minutes is my time. Arlong stated dejected that he took so long on his battle. 5 seconds. Replied Mihawk, who had beaten her opponent in a matter of seconds. Watch this. Katakuri finally stood up, the shackles were removed from his hands as the last of the sunlight finally disappearing in the horizon. The final battle will now commence. Warriors, please enter the arena. Katakuri complied, walking to the center of the stone platform. Boa Sandersonia's eyes glowed a certain yellow color, indicating that she had activated her night vision. Katakuri smirked under his scarf and looked at the snake zone. His eyes were gentle while hers were fierce, and they continued to stare at one another until Elder Nyan called the match. When she did, Sandersonia was standing, then her eyes rolled to the back of her head and she fell backwards. Though she never made contact with the floor as her opponent caught her before she fell on her back. Dead silence covered the arena once more before applause could be heard from Arlong and Brulé. It was actually quite comical for Brulé to try to clap while she was restrained by cuffs. Mihawk had a small smile on his face as Katakuri one-up him once again. There wasn't any bad blood, it was just friendly competition. The Strawwats have won this round, but we still have our pirate empress. Who has yet to emerge from her battle with Mugiwara. Elder Nyan confidently proclaimed. This caused a round of murmur to commence for the Kuja warriors. For now we rest, as the most important battle of the day is still ongoing. A testament to our empress's immense power. The Kujas retired to their homes, while the Strawwats were led to a separate sleeping quarter far from the capital. Katakuri relinquished Sandersonia to her sister, Marigold, when he was being led away from the arena. Defeating her was satisfactory, but he couldn't help but look at her once more as her green hair, fierce yellow eyes mesmerized him. As the Strawwats retired to their sleeping and the Kujas rested in their own home. Little did they know that the pirate empress was definitely losing herself to one Mugiwara monkey D, Luffy. And sleep was not an option. Sunrise. The very next day as the sunlight finally grazed the sky. Luffy stood over the balcony of the royal bedroom. There he overlooked the sky and took in the fresh air. He then felt warm hands wrap around his waist as the women of his desire joined him in his deep thoughts. What's on your mind? She was still sleepy as she hugged him, her breast grazed against his back. He then turned his head slightly, inhaling her scent. I like you, Hancock, I really do. I don't want this to be a one-time thing, I want this all the time. Me too, Luffy. He finally turned and looked her in her eyes, her beautiful, amazing gems staring right back at him. As you know, my adventures will take me to the open seas and I want you to come with me. Join my crew, be by my side when I conquer the world. Luffy had never felt this way about anybody before, all he used to think about was meat and fighting. But traveling back in time caused him to mature much faster, and it also helps that he was smarter than ever. Luffy. Before she could answer, an explosion occurred on the port entrance to Amazon Lily. She then looked him in the eyes once more before he nodded his head. He understood that she had to be the empress in her country at this time. Later. She kissed him in the mouth, her lips lingered with him for a moment before quickly changing to her empress attire. He then made his way to his own clothes, pulling out a small snail. He then proceeded to put on his clothes as she. Do new messages? Said the messenger snail. This was an amazing technology that the fish people were hiding. Amazing. Play. He didn't know what to say, but the snail responded and began to play the messages. First message, the voice then played as Queen Atoham. Hi Mugiwara, sent surprise. You did not expect a message to be left for you? One of our many technological advances that I am excited to share with our human friends, as per your request, we have located your people. Nico Robin is currently in Alabasta, but we have trouble reaching her as she is being safeguarded by Sir Crocodile. But good news in terms of your skeleton friend. He was picked up by the Sun Pirates and brought to Sabaody as per your request. He is currently at the care of Shaky. Anyway, if I don't pick up, you can leave a message for us. Then another voice played in the background. Wishing you well, Mugiwara. It was King Neptune's voice, to which Luffy smiled. Second message, the voice was Katakuri. Captain, we won. Then the message ends. Straight to the point, that was good. Then someone called and it was none other than Mihawk. Captain, an unknown stranger has entered the land. I feel that they have come with bad intentions. Where are they? How did they enter without permission from the Kuja? Asked Luffy over the messenger snail. The unknown person has entered through a burning slaver ship, no survivors on board, barging the gateway to Amazon Lily. The ship was covered in oil and is currently burning the wooden gate. That was the explosion I heard. Luffy wondered who it could be. Maybe someone he needs to be concerned about. And then he knew exactly who it was. Definitely someone who he should be concerned about. Then the call disconnected and nothing could be heard on the line. The call suddenly dropped, which confused Mihawk. Hello? Nothing. Then Arlong grabbed the phone and yelled at the snail. Captain. Though no answer on Luffy's end. In the sleeping quarter outside of the capital, the Strawwats looked at one another in concern, then they all got up and ran, disappearing into the distance. Katakuri had been the fastest, knowing exactly where Luffy was. After all, he had been in a battle with Hancock in the capital palace, where else would he be? Mihawk was close behind Katakuri, with Arlong keeping pace with Brulé, ensuring her safety in the foreign land. What had happened to Luffy and why did he hang up the line so suddenly? A week prior to the attack on Amazon Lily, a man sat at the peak of the slaver ship. He surveyed the surrounding, trying to locate any sign of life. Though no luck. The lead which he had followed led to a dead end and he was riding blind. The carcass which had covered the deck was thrown overboard to feed the sea life. He was a lone man floating aimlessly. Who was he? Well, his name was Agent 1, do you copy? A voice echoed throughout the empty ship. That was him, his codename under the Zephyr full agency. Happy, was his reply. Short, simple, concise. He took a bite out of an apple he found at one of the barrels that occupied the ship. Food shouldn't be a problem on his trip since he had enough food for the 49 slavers he found on the ship. There's a lead for your target 500 click somewhere in the northwest direction. Then your target became a ghost. Happy HQ, over and out. He then disconnected the call before finishing his apple. With the ship that he stole, it should take him a good 3 to 4 days depending on Grand Line weather. If he were to find his target, he would need a little luck. For the days he had estimated, all he could really do is to stay his course and push forward, no matter what the weather brought his way. He worked out when he could and rested when he could. But the journey was still tumultuous, but his spirit would not waver. He had a mission, and he never failed his mission. Never failed. His eyes closed as the memory passed through him again. There he stood, over a body of 500 soldiers, with the last of the hostages in his hands. A pirate crew had taken them hostage in order to bargain for the kingdom which they wanted to conquer, claim for themselves. The memory faded from his eyes, replaced by the moment which he took the pirate captain's head. He was shot on his back, leaving him incapable of battling for some time. They were going to dispose of him as his injuries were too dire, but he persevered, killing those who tried to kill him. It was then that he became the best. Nobody dared question him in the organization again. But why did he murder all those people? Well. Then his eyes opened, removing him from his daze. A story for another time. His journey has taken him on the outskirts of what seems to be a remote island. His gut was telling him this was the place, but there was simply nothing. He needs to circle the island several times to find an entranceway. So that he did. But he couldn't find anything, not even a sign of life. So why did intel bring him in this direction? They did say that his target disappeared after the initial intel. Did he leave? Though yet again, good fortune smiled upon him as a remote group of about 4 women, dressed in indigenous native attire, came out of the wooden forest, a few clicks ahead of him. They never looked in his direction, focused on something else. What was it? He didn't really care, all he knew was to wait for them to clear the area, disappearing in the distance, and he finally had a way in. He steered his ship to the direction which the indigenous came from and slowly went through a tunnel of giant trees. Then he found a giant wooden gate. It was going to be a problem. Then he had an idea. The agent went below deck, gathering as much oil as he could find and covering the entire ship. If it was a giant wooden gate, he should be able to burn it down. As he got close to the gate, he could hear a ring of panic from the indigenous hiding from the top of the gate. "What is that?" stated one of the guards. "Must be a lost ship. It will simply sink upon collision with the gate." Replying to another guard, the agent looked from his hiding location below the deck, where the slaves were held previously, and saw that only 2 women were guarding the gate. They were really confident about their security. They were going to get a rude awakening. The agent took out a match and lit it against the wall. Then as the ship collided with the gate, the agent ignited the entire ship, and with the ship covered in oil, the fire spread quickly. The impact generated a giant explosion, covering the bottom of the gate in flames. But the agent, he punched a hole on the bottom of the sea and swam underneath the wreckage. He was finally in, and he just had to find his target. That should be easy enough. A target with 1 billion biri on his head should be located at the central area of the island. His importance shouldn't be ignored, and therefore he will be in the capital. So the agent dashed through the forest. His speed was nothing to blink about. At the tender age of 18, he mastered the art of Rakishiki early, and all he had to do was hone it. Within a few moments of blowing a hole through the gate and traveling the massive remote island, he finally found the capital. And where will his target be? The tallest building, of course. He quickly scaled the side of the building, reaching the highest room. There he found a man speaking to someone over the line. He knew this was his target because the aura he was letting out. He attempted to kill him early. A quick swipe to his jugular should make it quick, but his target was stronger than that. For the man caught his arm before even turning around. The agent couldn't believe what was happening. All of his targets were eliminated swiftly, in and out in a matter of seconds. This was not good at all. "Hello, Lucci," said the man. "How the hell?" Then as quick as lightning, emptiness. The man had caught him before he could react, his fist colliding with his own face once, twice, thrice, then the agent couldn't count anymore as he was being barraged with punches, like a machine gun. Each strike was hitting him on his way down. Then nothing. His target was none other than Luffy, who was a bit on edge for getting interrupted from his moment with his women. And beating him down was from pent-up frustration against him, especially for what he did in his previous lifetime. But something happened. Another vision passed through him as his finally punch nearly connected with one of his most hated enemies. "Fuck." He exclaimed as he knew these things happened to gain a sense of how that person's past shapes their future. It was how he saw Queen Atohim's past which urged him to help save Fisher Tiger's life, how he saw the life which Hancock had to endure now peek into Lucci's life. Luffy found himself standing at a village on fire. A man, possibly in his 30s, was running. From what? He couldn't tell. In his arm was a child, no older than 8. His father stopped, holding the child up and holding his shoulders, violently shaking him to his senses. "Listen here, boy, she is dead, your mother is dead, and it is because of my weakness." The child stopped crying, still not understanding the situation. "If you are not on top, then you are dead." And as the words escaped his mouth, a bullet went through his head, blood spewing all over the child. No tears escaped the child's eyes as all he could do was freeze in shock. And before him, an uncanny figure with a strange-looking mask. The figure's left hand held a gun, its barrel still hot from the bullet which escaped it. The masked figure pointed its gun at the child's head to no reaction. Then as the masked figure was about to pull the trigger, the child disappeared in a blur, attempting to kill the figure which murdered his father in cold blood, but he was not able to reach him. It took another 2 masked figures to subdue the boy who was going berserk. The masked figure disappeared in the shadow, with the child's eyes never leaving the assailant for even a second. Then the memory transformed to another, this time the young boy had yet to grow, but a certain fire was in his eyes. He was on a training field, practicing the basics. It couldn't have been more than a couple months since the boy had lost his father. Then time seems to fast forward as the boy continued to train, from sunrise to sunset. His resolve was absolute, his will was undying. Nobody could beat him wherever he went, the perfect tool of war. His goal was to kill the agent which killed his father. But to do so, he needed to get stronger, and he needed to be high enough in ranking to gain access to top secret information. Then the boy grew after some time, possibly in his early teenage years. He stood before 2 masked figures, a different mask from the people from the earlier memory, but they seemed to be the instructors. "Agent 93, in order to prove your worth, you must destroy a warring kingdom. The pirates which have overthrown the sovereign power of that land have created an annoyance in which must be properly disposed." Stupid numbers was his thought, he only needed to move up to Agent 0 in order to reach his end goal, in order to get what he needs from them. The second masked figure then placed its hands on the shoulder of the teenager. "Upon completion, your place in the Zephyr full agency will be significantly favorable for you. And conversely, upon failure, you will be terminated." Copy. He had no choice in this world which he was forcefully brought into, it was killed or be killed, he needed to get his revenge, but at what cost? Luffy finally understood the foundation which made the monster, driven by revenge and thirst for power. He was just a child when he witnessed. Then it was the faithful mission, the mission to assassinate the 500 kingdom soldiers who were held hostage and to kill the pirate crew which took the kingdom into their own hand. Luffy watched as the assassin cleanly eliminated all of his target, skillfully and masterfully. Though nothing could prepare him for the end, for as he took the head of the pirate captain, his men shot him in the back, causing him to fade away. His mission was over, but he had failed, and failure was termination, and he was not going to die that day. He had a man he had to kill, and his life would not end there. In the carnage of which he left behind, 2 masked Zephyr full agents were sent in to kill the wounded agent. But he was not ready to die as he killed the men who were sent in to eliminate him. The last memory that Luffy saw Lucci, recovering from his injuries with a masked Zephyr full agent. The agent gave him a document, marked Agent 1. And then nothing. The memory ended and Luffy once again stood over the body of Rob Lucci. His body was beaten to its limits, the stone floor on his back has collapsed on its own. Lucky for him, Luffy had been holding back, not wanting to destroy the building for Hancock. By seeing his life, Luffy understood the man's goal and motivation. But yet he could not overlook everything that he has done, at least not for some time. Mihawk had been a warrior, brewing up fights all over the world in order to become the strongest. Arlong had yet to perform the atrocities he brought upon Nami's island. Burley and Katakuri were strictly working for their mother, and as far as he could tell, they were mostly responsible for their own areas and didn't really bother with their mother's business. So for their case, ignorance is bliss. His thoughts were interrupted when his crew finally arrived, probably alarmed by the abrupt ending to their call. "Everything okay?" Katakuri was the first man to arrive, looking first at Luffy whose fist was still covered in the assailant's blood. Then Mihawk barged right in as well, relaxing slightly at the sight of the captain being alright. "He's alive, I did not kill him." His voice was low, almost as if he had slight remorse for the assassin. "Well, what now?" asked Mihawk, observing the beaten man on the ground. "Bring him to the prison cell," was Luffy's command, confusing Katakuri. "Sure, Captain, but are we okay to do that?" Katakuri asked. Lucci was currently stuck on the ground, etched into the foundation. Katakuri and Mihawk had their back turned against the door while Luffy was facing the doorway. All Luffy could do was smile before a call came into Lucci's messenger snail. Agent 1, mission report. Luffy picked up a snail and placed it close to his mouth, speaking to whoever was on the other line. "Whatever you wanted to do, you failed," he responded. "Who the hell are you? Where is Agent 1? The man on the other line had an annoying voice. "Doesn't matter, whoever you are, your agent is done for, you have failed. Who the fuck cares? Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what happened to that stupid boy, all I care about is if Mugiwara has been eliminated." His words woke up the fallen warrior, his wounds were immense, but his body was numbed by his commander's words. "I will never die." He then hung up a snail call before they could trace the call, but did he let the call go on for too long? If so, then Rob Lucci's former agency, the Zephyr will be sending a group after them. Luffy was deep in his thoughts, cueing the rest to leave their captain in his thoughts. Katakuri and Mihawk picked up Lucci from the ground, partly conscious from the beating that he received from Luffy. Arlong and Broly finally arrived, but it was too late, they ended up following Katakuri and Mihawk. Though a half-hour passed before his lover joined him in the room, he was still stuck in his thoughts, contemplating the situation. The perimeter has been secured, the flames have contained at the gate. Hancock had arrived and snapped Luffy in his thoughts. It was then that Luffy came into a realization. "Luffy, what happened? We have to move out quickly, Zephyr is on my tail for some reason, and we need to get out of here, in the open sea, where you're not in danger, where your people are safe." Luffy assumed that Hancock would choose to stay with her country, but to his surprise, she chose him. "Luffy?" She then kissed him on the lips. "I'm going with you." "Really, you will go with me?" Luffy could not believe him, his heart fluttering at her answer to a question he had asked her earlier. "But what about your kingdom? Your people?" "I will be succeeded by my sister, Sandersonia, for the rule of Amazon Lily. I'm going with you, silly, after what we did, there's no one else I'd rather be with, but why do we have to leave? We can make our stand here in Amazon Lily, we would have the advantage." It was a valid question, but Luffy also had a more valid answer. "That's a good point, but also it is not. In your land of Amazon Lily, we would have an advantage of them coming to us, but there is the problem of having to look after your people. I don't want to risk your people's life when there is another way." He then brought her outside on the balcony, pointing at the open sea that was over the horizon. "In the open sea, we don't have to worry about anyone, it gives us a chance to let loose, for the Zephyr agency to see what the real Straw Hat Grand Armada is about." With that, Hancock smiled, finally understanding him. She knew her abilities and power, she was a royal Shichibukai despite being so young, but her lover was a $1 billion man, she couldn't help but shudder in excitement at seeing his power firsthand. Dungeons Amazon Lily. His body would wake up every now and then. Each would be worse than the last. Never in his life had he ever lost to anyone. A master of the Rakishiki, undefeated cold hard assassin. And here he was, cuffed against a stone wall, with a man who defeated him without a sweat, standing in front of him. Lucci spat blood that built up in his throat, his eyes slightly open from being inflamed. "Zephyr is coming." Luffy had his left hand on his chin, surveying the prisoner. "They do not care for you, if you die, it's not really a big deal to them." He knew that, he heard it before passing out again. "What do you want to do?" "There's only one thing I need to do, kill that man." "The one who killed your father?" Luffy knew this, he saw his memory. "Yeah." He replied angrily. "Then why become their puppet? A tool at their disposal. Access. If I reach a high enough rank in the organization, I'll get to learn his name. That makes sense, revenge can really shape a person to do horrible things for the sake of retribution." "Okay, Lucci. But what do you do now, your organization has abandoned you." "I know. I'll have to ask you." Lucci looked him directly in the eye. "That if I die here in this foreign land, to kill them all." "You won't die in this land, Lucci, you will be coming with me. I plan to meet the Zephyr unit that is heading this way. In the open ocean my crew will destroy them all. Will you accept?" Luffy would not have done this if he didn't know what the agent had gone through. Everyone had a story, everyone had a purpose. "Yes." To this, Luffy removed the agent's arms from bondage and caught him before falling on the floor. He collapsed from exhaustion, and blood flow was not good when hanging from a dungeon wall by the wrist. Good. The very next day. Lucci was immediately rushed to the infirmary ward with a day to recover from his wounds. The Straw Hats were debriefed of what the plan was, to which they all agreed would be a good plan. Sandersonia was given the throne of Amazon Lily, to which everyone joined in on the brief celebration. And finally it was time to go. "Thank you for the ship, Hancock." The crew was given a spare ship that the Kuja woman had taken from a lost pirate crew. "I hope it is good enough before we get to where you want to get a ship." "It will." He gave her a kiss on the lips before she slapped him playfully on his chest. "Not now, there's people here." For a pirate empress, she sure was shy when showing affection. They were currently on the deck of the ship, except for Lucci, who had been placed in one of the rooms below the deck. Arlong had his arms around Broly. Katakuri was paying attention to the meeting, and so was Mihawk. Right. So everyone, once we meet them, we don't hold back. They are coming after us to kill us, to destroy anyone who gets in the way of their goal. Right, Captain? Replied Katakuri. I shall prove my worth. Let's make it a competition. Exclaimed Arlong. I'll take your wager, Arlong. A month's cabin boy chores to the one with the least enemies slain. Mihawk proclaimed. You can even combine yours and Brulee's total to make it fair. Fine. Arlong replied, knowing Mihawk would mop the floor on him, but with Brulee, maybe they'll have a chance. Excellent, me and Hancock will take care of the command center, I feel. Then, to the surprise of the crew, Lucci had walked out of bed and towards the deck of the ship, gripping onto the railing for support. They will probably bring 3 ships full of maybe 2 high-ranking Zephyr full agents, a commander and about 200 recruits. And leave me him, that rat will definitely be there. I will kill Spandine myself. He was Agent 1, his access was one step away from gaining absolute knowledge within the organization. He surveyed him for a moment, his body oozing with anger that Luffy couldn't deny his request. Alright, revenge was truly an unbelievable driving force. Luffy smiled at Lucci, maybe he'll get the answer he's been looking for. So their plan was now in motion. The ship which they boarded finally set its course to the open sea, its trajectory was on a collision course with the Zephyr full attack unit that is heading to Amazon Lily to kill them. Some distance away from them, in correlation with Lucci's intel, the Zephyr foe did bring 3 ships. They did have 200 capable fighters within the organization. And lastly, they did have commanding officer Spandam and 2 additional high-ranking Zephyr full agents, Agent 2 and Agent 3. Thank you for watching. Please comment down below if you hear this. Have a nice day and check out my other VODs.